The penny came in a white pharmacy envelope with Mara's full name typed across the front. She set it beside the bottle on her kitchenette table and stared at both until the refrigerator compressor clicked off. In the new silence, the coin looked less like money than a period at the end of a sentence. The bottle was empty, thick, green-tinted glass, its faded cream label still carrying Eleanor Hart's old address. The plain cork had dried in place. Mara wrapped the bottle in a dish towel, worked the cork back and forth, and nearly laughed when it finally came loose with a small, unimpressive pop. Something pale showed in a slit along the cork. Mara pinched it with her fingernails and drew out a narrow cream strip of paper. 4 words had been written in her grandmother's cramped blue ink. 418 Weller Street, a second address. Mara read it 3 times, then looked at the penny. If Eleanor had wanted to reject her so completely, why had she hidden an address where only Mara was likely to find it? An hour earlier, the conference room at Baines and Porter had smelled of burnt coffee and new carpet. There were no shelves of leather books, no green banker's lamps, none of the courtroom furniture Owen had apparently expected. He kept glancing around as though the real inheritance might be brought in on a cart once everyone stopped wasting time. Celia sat straight-backed beside him, a leather folder resting under both hands. She wore Eleanor's pearl earrings. Mara recognized the faint scratches on one clasp because she had repaired it at her grandmother's kitchen table when she was 19. "Those look nice," Mara said. Celia touched one pearl. "Your grandmother wanted me to have them." The attorney, Alan Baines, cleared his throat and adjusted a pair of reading glasses that did not need adjusting. He had already distributed the copies. Mara's consisted of 3 pages and a yellow tab, marking a single paragraph. Owen's copy was thick enough to bend. He wore a navy blazer over a golf shirt and had placed his truck keys on the table where everyone could see the silver dealership logo. At 35, he still had the smooth, rested face of a man who described other people's exhaustion as poor planning. He tapped the will. "So the house is mine, free and clear?" "Subject to the estate's ordinary expenses," Baines said. "But no mortgage, no mortgage." Owen smiled, then arranged his mouth into something more funeral appropriate. Grandma was smart. She knew real estate. She knew not to borrow against the roof over her head, Celia said. Mara looked down at the paragraph bearing her name. Eleanor's signature appeared below it, angular but steady. The will was 6 years old enough to predate the final argument by 11 months. Old enough that Eleanor could have changed it at any point afterward. Baines read the clause aloud because apparently humiliation became official only when spoken by a man billing in 6-minute increments. "To my granddaughter, Mara Hart, I leave the sum of 1 cent, this provision being intentional and made with full knowledge." The room remained still. Mari had prepared for nothing. She had prepared for a sentimental object she would not know where to put. She had prepared for $500, which would have covered part of what she owed on her rented room. She had even prepared for being left out entirely. 1 cent required effort. Owen shifted in his chair. She always did like clarity. Celia shot him a warning look, but too late. Mara folded her copy along the yellow tab. "Does it come before or after taxes?" Baines blinked. "The penny," she said. "I need to know whether I should call somebody." Owen snorted. Celia did not. Her expression tightened in the old familiar way, as if Mara had spilled something at a nice restaurant. "There's no need to turn this into a performance," Celia said. "That's a relief. I didn't rehearse." Baines removed his glasses. "Miss Hart, I understand this may be difficult." Mara had heard that sentence 4 times in 6 weeks. The apprenticeship coordinator had used it when the maintenance company lost a hospital contract and eliminated her position. Her landlord had used it before explaining that understanding did not reduce rent. A nurse had used it when Mara arrived at the hospice 2 hours after Eleanor died. She wondered whether difficult was a place people sent you so they would not have to follow. "I'm fine," she said. Celia's eyes dropped to Mara's hands. The nails were short and blackened at the edges from helping a former co-worker replace a circulation pump the previous afternoon. Mara had scrubbed twice. The grease had stayed. "Of course you are," Celia said softly. There it was, the trick Celia could perform with 5 ordinary words. Concern on the surface, accusation underneath. Baines moved on. Savings to Celia, jewelry to Celia, the row house on Foster Avenue and its contents to Owen, excluding several named objects. Owen asked whether the basement freezer counted as a fixture. Celia told him not to be tacky while wearing the dead woman's earrings. Mara studied Eleanor's signature. The last time she had seen her grandmother alive, Eleanor had been standing behind the storm door with one hand on the lock. Mara had driven there after receiving Celia's message. "Don't come back until you're ready to tell the truth." She had brought bank statements, work schedules, and a receipt from the hardware store where she had been when the cash disappeared. None proved she had not gone upstairs earlier. Celia claimed she had seen her near Eleanor's bedroom. Owen said Mara had been desperate for tool money. Eleanor had looked past Mara toward the street, frightened less by the supposed theft than by the possibility of choosing wrong. "Tell me you believe me," Mara had said. Eleanor's mouth trembled. "I don't know what to believe. That's not an answer. It's the only honest one I have." Mara had left before honesty could become another name for abandonment. At the conference table, Baines slid the pharmacy envelope toward her. Something scraped faintly inside. "I don't normally distribute nominal gifts in cash," he said. "Mrs. Hart left the coin with the executed will. Of course she did. This exact envelope was in her file." Mara pressed one finger against it. Eleanor had touched it, sealed it, and put Mara's name on it while there was still time to do something else. The meeting ended with signatures. Owen took a call in the hall and began saying words like comps and staging before the conference room door had closed behind him. Baines asked Celia to remain for executor paperwork. Mara had reached the elevator when Celia called her name. She approached carrying a cardboard wine carrier by its handle. Inside was the green bottle. "There was one more thing," Celia said. "Another scent? This was in the kitchen pantry. Your grandmother kept it on the top shelf behind the canning jars." Celia lifted it free. Dust softened the green glass. The label had yellowed almost to brown around the edges. "It isn't in the will. It has no value." "Then Owen should love it." "He's getting the house, Mara. He can't be expected to sort every piece of rubbish." The elevator arrived with a chime. Neither woman moved. Mara recognized the bottle. Eleanor used to keep cold tap water in it during summers when the pipes ran warm. As a teenager, Mara had once called it Grandma's fancy trash, and Eleanor had made her hold it up to the light. "Good glass outlives the person careless enough to throw it away," she had said. Mara did not share the memory. Celia had a way of taking anything spoken aloud and filing the edges off it. "So why give it to me?" Celia's smile was tired, almost kind. That made what followed worse. "I thought you should have something suited to your expectations." For one wild second, Mara pictured letting the bottle fall between them. Green glass bursting across the polished floor, Celia stepping back in Eleanor's pearls. Instead, Mara took it. "Thank you," she said. Celia's smile vanished. "You always did prefer a gesture to an apology." "For what?" "You know for what." "No, I know what you accuse me of. Your grandmother needed peace at the end. Did she have it?" The question landed harder than Mara intended. Celia looked toward the attorney's door where Owen's laughter passed through the glass. "I took care of her every day," she said. "I know. You came when it was interesting. When something needed fixing, when she was in a good mood, when you could feel like her favorite. I was there for the pills and the laundry and the nights she called me because she couldn't breathe." Mara gripped the neck of the bottle. Celia's anger was not invented. That was what made fighting with her like walking across a floor full of loose nails. Some pieces of the truth were sharp enough to go through a boot. I asked you to tell me when she got worse, and I asked you to admit what you did." The elevator doors began to close. Mara put out her hand, and they shuddered open again. "I didn't take her money." Celia's face settled. "Then I suppose none of us will ever know." Mara entered the elevator with the bottle and penny. As the doors closed, she saw Celia glance at the bottle, not with contempt now, but with a quick crease between her eyebrows. By the time Mara reached her building, rain had begun and ended. Water shone in the seams of the sidewalk. Her rented room occupied the back half of a narrow second-floor apartment above a tax preparation office whose window still advertised refunds from the previous spring. She placed the penny and bottle on the kitchenette table, pulled the cork, and found the address. Now the strip lay beside her phone. She searched 418 Weller Street. The first result was a map pin near the edge of an industrial neighborhood. The street view image, captured 3 years earlier, showed a chain-link fence and a long brick wall stained black below a row of windows. Farther back, the ridges of a sawtooth roof rose against a white summer sky. Hart Bell Refill and Bottling read an old business listing, permanently closed. Mara searched the name. Most results were useless directories. One archived neighborhood article mentioned reusable bottles, local delivery routes, and a community land trust. A photograph refused to load. Another listing gave a disconnected phone number. She tried Eleanor's name with the business and got a scanned notice from a city newsletter dated 11 years earlier. The text was too blurred to read on her cracked screen, but she could make out E. Hart beneath a group photograph. Her phone rang in her hand. Owen. Mara watched it buzz twice before answering. "Did you find another appliance you need me to disclaim?" "What, the basement freezer? Oh, right." He laughed. "Baines said it's part of the house." "Listen, you didn't take anything from Grandma's place, did you?" Mara looked at the bottle. "A family tradition of asking me that. I mean, today, Celia said she gave you some old bottle." "She did." "What kind?" "Empty." "I know it's empty." "What kind of bottle?" "Green." Owen exhaled. "Can you be normal for 10 seconds? I'm saving those for Christmas." There was a pause. In the background, a turn signal clicked. Owen was already driving somewhere, moving on to the next useful thing. "Celia gets weird about Grandma's old junk," he said. "She probably shouldn't have handed out anything before we finish inventory. It wasn't listed." "Still, the house and contents come to me." "You want it?" Another pause, shorter this time. "No, I'm saying don't throw it away until we know." Mara turned the cream strip over. The back was blank. "Know what? What it is? You heard Celia. It's suited to my expectations." "Mara," she ended the call. For several minutes, she listened to water dripping from the fire escape outside her window. She should have worked on applications. A property management company in Laurel wanted an entry-level maintenance technician with 3 years of experience for a position labeled trainee. Another job required her to supply her own van. Rent was due in 9 days. Instead, she opened the bus schedule. Weller Street required 2 transfers and a final walk from Hanover. If she left in the morning, she could be there before noon. That felt too eager, as if Eleanor had crooked one finger from the grave and Mara had come running. She told herself she would wait a week. Then she remembered Celia's glance at the bottle, Owen's sudden concern about inventory, and the deliberate slit cut into the cork. Mara packed a flashlight, water, a granola bar, her work gloves, and the phone charger that only worked when bent near the plug. She slid the penny into the front pocket of her navy backpack. The cream strip went into an envelope between 2 pieces of cardboard. The bottle would not fit safely inside, so she rinsed it and set the cork back in its neck. The following afternoon was cool and clear. The earlier rain scrubbed from the sky. Mara got off the second bus too soon and walked 6 extra blocks past warehouses, repair shops, and a bakery venting warm yeast into an alley. By the time she found Weller Street, late sunlight had turned the wet pavement copper. A cracked driveway ran through a front gate toward a building much larger than the map image had suggested. Mara stopped at the curb. The three-story brick depot towered ahead, its tall, stained walls catching bands of golden light. Sawtooth roof lines cut sharply into the clear blue sky. Rust streaked the loading bays. Weeds crowded the foundation, and a weathered bottling sign clung faintly above the central entrance. Beyond the fence, the wet driveway formed a dark leading line straight toward it. Mara adjusted both straps of her navy backpack over her olive canvas jacket. Her faded jeans were damp at the cuffs above her caramel work boots. She held Eleanor's empty green bottle low in her right hand and stepped through the gate with her back to the street. Halfway up the driveway, grief made her slow. The building filled almost everything in front of her. It was decaying, sunlit, and far too large for one hidden address to explain. Then, from somewhere beyond the boarded central bay, metal struck metal. Mara stopped. A woman's voice called from inside. "If you're here to steal copper, you pick the one building in Baltimore where the copper gave up first." Mara tightened her grip on the bottle. "I'm not here for copper. That's also what people stealing copper say." The voice came from behind a warped personnel door set into the central bay. A chain rattled. The door opened 6 inches, stopped against something on the floor, then scraped wider with a sound that made Mara's teeth hurt. A woman in a brown quilted vest leaned into the gap. She looked to be in her late 60s, with silver hair cut close around her ears and a red bandana knotted at her throat. One hand held a ring of keys, the other held a length of galvanized pipe. Mara raised her empty hand. The woman looked at the bottle instead. Her grip on the pipe changed. "Where did you get that?" "My grandmother." That answer has ruined a lot of pawn shops. "Which grandmother?" "Eleanor Hart." The woman stared at Mara's face long enough to find whatever resemblance she expected there. Then her gaze traveled down Mara's jacket, jeans, boots, and backpack before returning to the bottle. "Eleanor's dead. 6 days ago. I heard 4. The funeral was 4 days ago. I heard about the funeral. Nobody told me when she died. The accusation was aimed past Mara at someone not present. I didn't know she still had people here," Mara said. The woman's mouth pulled sideways. "That sounds like Eleanor." She lowered the pipe but did not put it down. "You Mara?" Mara's shoulders went rigid. "How do you know my name?" "Same way I know that bottle shouldn't be out in the rain." "It isn't raining." "It was. Bring it inside." The woman disappeared before Mara could decide whether the invitation was an answer. The open door showed darkness cut by a narrow stripe of amber sunlight. Mara looked back once at the empty street. A delivery truck passed at the far intersection without slowing. She stepped over the threshold. Inside, the building smelled of wet brick, dust, old oil, and something mineral she could not place. The central production bay stretched the length of the building, so tall that her first instinct was to whisper. Sawtooth windows poured angled light across steel posts and suspended pipes. In the middle of the floor stood a massive cast-iron machine, assembled from rollers, tanks, gears, and curved metal guards. Its paint had once been dark green. Rust now feathered its seams. Water dripped steadily into 3 mismatched buckets. The woman nudged a rubber doorstop back into place with the toe of a square black shoe. "Show me." Mara held out the bottle. "Not like you're feeding a horse. Put it on the bench." A scarred wooden workbench stood beside the door. Mara set the bottle down carefully. The woman placed the pipe beside it, then took the bottle in both hands and rotated it toward the light. Her thumb stopped on a shallow chip near the base. "Well," she said, "you recognize it?" "I recognize my own root mark." She angled the glass. Scratched low near the heel were 2 short lines crossed by a third. Mara had taken them for damage. "Drivers marked sample bottles so they didn't vanish into customer stock," the woman said. "This one rode in my cab. Eleanor stole it." Mara almost smiled. "You said that like you're proud. I told her she could keep it if she stopped putting her pencils in my coffee cup. She did not stop. I suppose that makes it a negotiated settlement." She looked at Mara. "Cork? In it? Anything else?" The question was too casual. Mara leaned one hip against the bench. Like what? Residue. A smell. Dead spider. I don't know what Eleanor collected in her pantry. There was a piece of paper. The woman became very still. Mara waited for her to ask. When she did not, Mara said, "It had this address. Do you have it?" "Somewhere safe." "Meaning you don't trust me. Meaning I met you holding a pipe. That was sensible of you." The woman set the bottle down. Ida Bell, Mara Hart. I knew that part. Ida picked up the pipe and carried it to a rolling cart. Only then did Mara see the fittings arranged beside it and a tape measure clipped to Ida's vest. The weapon had been a piece of work interrupted. "What are you doing here?" Mara asked. "Same thing I've been doing twice a week since people decided closed meant abandoned. Checking leaks, walking the fence, resetting traps, telling grown men there is no copper worth dying under a collapsed catwalk for. Does the building belong to you?" "No." "To my grandmother?" Ida gave her a dry look. "Definitely no." A knot inside Mara loosened and tightened at the same time. She had not allowed herself to name what she imagined. Not money, exactly, and not a building, because she knew enough about buildings to understand that owning this one could be a sophisticated form of drowning. Still, the hidden address had made a small, reckless room in her mind. Ida saw something cross her face. "Come on," she said. "If you're going to be disappointed, you might as well know the square footage of it." She took a flashlight from the cart, though enough daylight remained to see the central aisle. Their footsteps echoed. To the left, wooden pallets had collapsed into gray slats. To the right, racks rose toward the windows, mostly empty except for nests of leaves and several rows of cloudy glass bottles. Mara stopped beside the cast-iron machine. Was this the washer? Still is. Looks seized. It is. Mara crouched without touching it. Rust packed the edges of the drive chain. A rubber hose had split open like old bark. Beneath the nearest tank, a mineral white trail marked years of leakage. Motor? Removed before shutdown. Rebuilt. Stored upstairs. Why? So it wouldn't sit under a roof leak. Mara looked up. A brown stain spread across the ceiling above them, but the floor directly below was dry. You moved the leak. We moved the machine's electrical cabinet. The leak has free will. Ida continued walking. Mara followed past the washer toward the rear of the bay. A metal staircase climbed to a small office mezzanine overlooking the machinery. Its lower steps were striped with yellow caution tape. "Don't use that," Ida said. "I wasn't." "You looked at it with ambition." "I was checking the stringers. Check from the ground." At the rear, they passed through a fire door propped open with a brick. The boiler room was darker and warmer, though no boiler was running. The air held the metallic smell Mara had noticed at the entrance. A maze of corroded pipes ran along the wall. Several were wrapped in old insulation tagged with red warning tape. One valve had been replaced recently, its brass body bright against the rust. Mara pointed. "You did that?" "Plumber did." "Why keep water on in a closed building?" "Only one cold line is live. Trust requires basic fire protection and a working toilet for anyone doing inspections. The toilet has philosophical objections." A handwritten sign taped to the restroom door read, "Handle up, wait, then pray." Mara laughed before she could stop herself. Ida glanced at her. "You do look like Eleanor when you're trying not to enjoy something." The laugh died. "I wouldn't know." Ida's expression changed, not to sympathy, but attention. "No, we weren't speaking. How long?" "Long enough." "Whose choice?" Mara studied the new valve. "Does it matter to the plumbing?" "No, plumbing will punish everybody without prejudice." Ida moved toward a steel door at the side. Mara appreciated the retreat enough not to say so. The door opened onto the fenced yard. A loading ramp sloped from the bay, its rails orange with rust. Weeds pushed through cracks in the pavement, still jeweled with rain. Beyond the fence stood an auto glass warehouse and the blank rear wall of a furniture outlet. "This was route staging," Ida said. "Clean bottles came out by account. Returns went through the lower bay so broken glass stayed away from filling. How many routes? At the largest? 11. When I started, 6. When we closed, 1.5. How do you have half a route? You spend Monday pretending you still have Tuesday. Ida descended 2 steps of the ramp, tested a railing, and frowned when it moved. Mara noticed chalk marks near the base plates. You're documenting repairs? Documenting decay. Different budget. Who pays for it? Southweller Community Trust. The name matched the archived article. They own this? Land and building. Have for 12 years. And Eleanor? Helped arrange the transfer. Kept the books here before that. Argued with every person involved before, during, and after. That sounds like her. Ida turned. Now you sound like you knew her. The yard seemed to sharpen around Mara, the weeds, the damp fence, the slight squeak of the loose rail in Ida's hand. I knew one version. Most of us only get one version of anybody. Which one did you get? The one who brought her own wrench to budget meetings. That was so specifically Eleanor that Mara could see her. Handbag on one arm, adjustable wrench in the other, ready to prove a repair should cost $12 less. Ida went back inside. Mara remained on the ramp for a moment, looking at a line of shallow channels cut into the yard pavement to carry wash water toward an old drain. The entire place bore the marks of repeated use, not picturesque age, work, repairs laid over repairs, decisions preserved in pipe angles and patched brick. When she returned to the production bay, Ida stood at the bench, wrapping the bottle in a clean shop rag. I can carry it, Mara said. I know, I'm protecting it from your backpack. It didn't fit. Good. Never put loose glass against a metal flashlight. Mara accepted the wrapped bottle. You still haven't told me how you knew my name. No. Or why my grandmother hid this address. I don't know why she hid it. But you expected something in the Cork. Ida put both hands in her vest pockets. Eleanor called me in February, first time in nearly a year, asked whether the trust's succession file was current. Mara felt the phrase before she understood it. Succession to what? The operating lease. Whose lease? Nobody's now. Depot stopped operating. Trust has been maintaining the shell while we look for a use that fits the charter. And my name is in a file? It was the last time I saw it. Mara stared at her. Why? That is a longer conversation. I took 2 buses. Then you know how time works. Ida went to the personnel door and looked through its wired glass window at the lowering sun. The office copy isn't here. Trust records are kept at the church annex on Cross Street. I can get access tomorrow. Can I? You can come with me. Mara's phone vibrated in her backpack. Owen's name lit the cracked screen when she pulled it out. Ida read nothing, but her gaze lingered on Mara's face. You need to answer that? No. You sure? Mara silenced the call. Ida opened the door. Golden light spilled across the dusty floor and caught the bottle through the shop rag, turning its exposed edge a deep, watery green. 10 tomorrow morning, Ida said, and wear those same boots. Why? Because the file may say your name, but paper is the cleanest thing in this building. Mara stepped outside. What does that mean? It means Eleanor did not leave you a building. I figured that out. She didn't leave you a business either. There isn't one. The door began to close, then paused. What she may have left, Ida said, is the right to ask for work nobody else wanted. The latch caught before Mara could answer. Behind the wired glass, Ida's shape moved away into the enormous darkening bay. Owen called again. Mara stood with the bottle against her chest and watched his name disappear from the screen. Then a message appeared. Whatever you found, don't let Celia know yet. A second message followed almost immediately. Call me, I'm serious. Mara looked back at the depot. High in the sawtooth windows, the last sunlight burned amber against the dirty glass. She typed, "It's an empty building." The 3 dots of Owen's reply appeared. Before he could send it, Mara switched off her phone. By the time the bus came, Owen had sent 4 more messages. The first said he knew the building could not truly be empty if Eleanor had bothered hiding the address. The second asked whether there were vehicles, equipment, or stored inventory. The third reminded Mara that the house and its contents belonged to him. The fourth said, "I'm only trying to protect you." That one made her turn the phone off again. On the ride home, the bottle occupied the seat beside her, wrapped in Ida's shop rag and secured under Mara's hand whenever the bus turned. Across the aisle, a man in paint-spattered pants glanced at it twice before asking if she was transporting a rare wine. "Air," Mara said. "Good year? Family vintage." He nodded as though that answered everything. Back in her room, Mara set the bottle on the table and opened her laptop. The battery warning appeared before the screen reached full brightness. She found Southweller Community Trust on a website that looked older than several of its board members. Its front page displayed photographs of a neighborhood garden, a row of restored storefronts, and the refill depot when the bricks were still red. The property page was brief. The trust had acquired the depot to preserve it for community-serving production, training, and environmentally responsible local commerce. The last operator had surrendered its lease 8 years ago. Proposals since then had failed because they required selling the land, demolishing the building, or converting it to a use the charter did not allow. A link labeled Operator Interest led to a 9-page form. Applicants needed financial projections, safety assessments, service commitments, environmental plans, insurance, references, and evidence of relevant experience. Mara read the list twice. The only box she could confidently check was her name. She searched the phrase succession file and found nothing. At 2 a.m, she woke in her chair with her cheek against the sleeve of her canvas jacket. The bottle stood in the blue laptop light. Behind it, the penny waited in its envelope. Mara closed the computer and went to bed without undressing. At 9:40 the next morning, she reached the church annex on Cross Street, carrying the bottle inside a cardboard drink carrier she had reinforced with tape. The one-story brick building had an accessible ramp, a blue door, and a paper sign requesting that visitors not abandon food donations after hours. Someone had abandoned half a pumpkin. Ida was waiting beside the door with 2 coffees. "You're late," she said. "It's 9:40. You're 20 minutes early instead of 30. You didn't specify a separate Ida Bell time zone." Ida handed her a cup. "Cream, no sugar." "How do you know?" "Eleanor took hers that way." Mara stopped with the cup halfway to her mouth. Ida winced. "That was lazy. Sorry. Did she tell you I drink coffee like her?" "No," I guessed, and then tried to make it sound informed. It was the first apology Mara had heard in days that did not contain the word but. She took a sip. "You guessed right." Annoying when that happens. Inside, the annex smelled of floor wax and old radiators. Folding tables leaned against one wall. A bulletin board held notices for tax assistance, a tool exchange, and a meeting about storm drain repairs. Ida unlocked a narrow records room, flicked on a fluorescent tube, and muttered when it blinked. "You maintain this building too?" Mara asked. "I criticize it. Less liability." Metal shelving filled the room. Ida pulled a gray archive box from the second shelf and placed it on a desk barely large enough to hold it. Southweller Refill Depot was written across the lid in black marker. Beneath that, in different ink, someone had added Operator Succession. Ida did not open it. "Before we start," she said, "the trust does not owe you anything because Eleanor put your name in here." "I know. You say that quickly. I read the application. That thing scares people with money. It worked on me for free." Ida rested her palms on the box. Eligible successor means the trust agreed to consider a named person under a streamlined review if the previous operating group dissolved. It does not bypass safety requirements, the charter, or the board. It does not give you the land. It does not give you the building. You covered that yesterday. I have met heirs. I'm not one. I got a penny. Ida looked at her for a long moment. Literally? Mara reached into her backpack and removed the white envelope. She tipped the coin onto her palm. Ida leaned closer. That woman. You sound surprised. I'm deciding which rude word has the correct weight. You have options? At my age, vocabulary is the one account that compounds. Mara returned the penny to its envelope. Open the box. Ida lifted the lid. The first folders concerned the depot's transfer to the trust. Mara recognized Eleanor's handwriting on tab labels and margin notes, but Ida moved those aside. Beneath them lay route summaries, equipment inventories, inspection reports, and a blue folder bearing Mara's name. Not M. Hart, not potential successor. Mara Hart. Her fingers went cold. Ida placed the folder in front of her. Take your time. I've had 6 years. That isn't the same kind. Mara opened it. The first page was a succession nomination dated nearly 7 years earlier. Eleanor had typed most of it, but filled several blank lines by hand. Mara's age was wrong by 1 year because Eleanor always forgot whether to count the birthday coming or the birthday past. Relevant experience, building repair assistance, route observation, customer contact, basic equipment maintenance. Mara stared at route observation. She had ridden with Eleanor only twice. Once the van's heater had failed in January, and Eleanor had made her keep invoices inside her coat so the carbonless paper would not stiffen. The second time, they had collected 63 bottles from a restaurant that claimed to have 30. Eleanor made Mara count them aloud while the chef protested in 2 languages. The file included copies of Mara's old apprenticeship application and a pencil sketch she had drawn at 20. 3 neighborhood collection points feeding 1 short pickup route. She'd made it at Eleanor's kitchen table after complaining that the depot wasted fuel chasing individual returns. At the time, Eleanor had called the arrows sloppy. Across the top, she had later written, "Small system may be viable where old scale was not." Mara ran her thumb near the note without touching it. "Did she tell you she kept this?" "No." "Did you know?" "I knew she nominated you." "I didn't know what she included." The next page was a recommendation from Eleanor. Mara Hart understands that maintenance is not the same as making something look new. She is willing to repair what remains useful, remove what has become unsafe, and learn the difference. Mara read the lines again. They were not affectionate. Eleanor rarely trusted affection on paper. Still, nobody had ever described Mara's work so exactly. Below the paragraph, Eleanor had listed weaknesses: limited capital, incomplete formal training, impatient when questioned, tends to begin physical work before confirming total cost. Mara let out a disbelieving breath. There she is. Ida smiled into her coffee. Did she have to include a character assassination? Trust asked for risks. She could have written inexperienced. She was specific when being unkind. She was specific all the time. That too. The nomination bore signatures from 3 trust members, including Ida. A stamped note marked Mara eligible for successor review if the operating lease became vacant within 10 years. The date fell 11 months before the accusation. Mara turned the page. A later memorandum, written after the depot closed, recommended inviting Mara to assess a pilot restart. Eleanor had revised it by hand. Whole sentences were crossed out and rewritten, but the final version was unsigned. Behind it were 2 meeting sheets, each named Eleanor, Ida, and Mara as expected attendees. Each carried a cancellation note. The first, E. Hart postponed, family matter. The second, 5 months later, E. Hart canceled, no reschedule requested. Mara kept her eyes on the papers. "Did you call me?" she asked. "No." "Why not?" Eleanor said the situation had changed, and that was enough? At the time, yes. What did she tell you? That you were no longer available and did not want contact. Mara laughed once. The sound was empty. "I sent her letters." "I didn't know that. Celia said she gave them to her." Ida pulled out the desk chair opposite Mara and sat. "There are things I can tell you about Eleanor and things I would only be guessing. Start with what you know. I know she asked me in February whether this file was current. She asked what would happen if the named successor had never been notified. What did you say? That eligibility would remain until the 10-year period expired unless the trust voted to withdraw it for cause. And then? She said she needed to correct an unfinished piece of business. Mara looked at the canceled meeting sheets. Did she say my name? No, she didn't have to. Did she tell you about the bottle? No, you expected something in the cork. Ida nodded toward the reinforced drink carrier. We used cork slits for route notices when rain would ruin paper clipped to a crate. A driver could carry an address inside a sample bottle without losing it. Eleanor remembered old systems when normal communication would have served better. Why not call me? I asked her that. And she said she had to be sure before she disturbed your life. Mara felt anger rise with such speed that she had to put the recommendation page down. My life, she said. She left me 1 cent. Ida's face did not soften. Then she failed to finish more than one thing. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Mara wanted Ida to defend Eleanor so she could push back. She wanted her to condemn Eleanor so she could accuse a stranger of not understanding. Instead, Ida sat beside the archive box and let the dead woman remain complicated. What happens now? Mara asked. That depends on what you think this is. A building with a bad roof and worse plumbing. Good start. An old nomination. Also true, and some proof that my grandmother once believed in me. Ida glanced at the penny envelope. Once? Mara closed the blue folder. I don't know. Ida pulled the operator interest form from another file, but she did not offer it. The trust can give an eligible successor 60 days to submit a feasibility proposal before opening review to outside applicants. You would need to request that period. During it, you may inspect the property with approved tradespeople, review non-confidential operating records, and propose a limited service model. And if I don't, the eligibility remains until it expires. The building keeps leaking. What would a lease cost? Base rent is low. Insurance is not. Utilities are cruel. Repairs are crueler. I'm unemployed. That is not a recommendation. It's not a secret either. Ida finally slid the form across the desk. Do not sign because Eleanor hid an address. Grief makes expensive decisions and calls them destiny. Mara read the first line. Request for successor feasibility period. I'd only be requesting time. Time has costs, so does not knowing. Ida watched her remove a pen from her backpack. Mara paused above the signature line. She pictured Owen claiming the building held something worth dividing, Celia saying Eleanor needed peace, and Eleanor writing that Mara knew maintenance was not the same as making something look new. Then she thought of the corroded pipes and the washer's seized chain. She signed her name. Ida took the form, checked the date, and returned it. You keep it, Mara said. Board secretary has to log it. Until then, it's yours. Why? Because this is the point where people like to imagine they've been given something. Ida tapped the form. You haven't. You've asked permission to find out how bad it is. I know, Mara said. No, you know the sentence. The invoice comes later. Ida stacked the blue folder on top of the archive box and carried Mara's request into the annex office. A copier began groaning behind the half-closed door. Mara remained at the little desk with the penny, the bottle, and Eleanor's description of her weaknesses. Tends to begin physical work before confirming total cost. Mara returned the penny to her backpack and kept both hands in her lap until Ida came back. Trust secretary will log it today, Ida said, giving her a copy. Assuming you are approved for the feasibility period, you'll need a licensed plumber before you touch the water system. I know plumbers. Licensed ones? One. Who likes you? Mara thought of Tomas Reed, who had supervised plumbing work on 2 buildings during her apprenticeship. On good days, he had treated her like a competent pair of hands. On bad days, he had treated everybody like a clog. That may reduce the number to 0. Ida opened another folder. The trust used Thomas Reed last year. You know Thomas. He bought from the depot. 5-gallon water bottles for his old shop before 5 gallons became heavier than his pride would admit. That doesn't sound like him. You haven't seen him carry them. The permission email arrived while Mara was standing in the annex parking lot, trying to decide whether she could afford a second bus fare instead of walking to the transfer stop. The board secretary had approved 60 days, subject to access rules and proof of insurance for any physical work. Inspection did not count as physical work as long as nobody opened a system, energized equipment, removed material, climbed restricted stairs, or behaved in a manner inconsistent with ordinary professional caution. Mara read that final phrase twice. Ida leaned over her shoulder. They added that after a man inspecting the roof brought roller skates. That can't be true. It was a youth center proposal. He was 42. Mara called Tomas from the sidewalk. He answered with machinery roaring in the background. If this is about a dripping faucet, put a bowl under it. It's Mara. The machinery stopped. Mara, who knows the difference between a faucet and a valve? That's me. I heard about Northline cutting the apprentice crew. I'm sorry, you hear everything? Only plumbing and misfortune. They travel through walls. She explained the depot as simply as she could. The hidden address sounded foolish aloud, so she left out the Cork and said her grandmother had directed her there. She emphasized that she was assessing a limited restart, not restoring the entire building. Thomas was quiet. What? Mara asked. You said Weller Street? 418, I know it. You work there? I bought from there. Long time ago. So you'll look? I charge for looking. How much? His price consumed nearly half the money Mara had set aside for groceries and transportation that week. She closed her eyes. Can you give me a written condition summary? For that price, yes, not a stamped engineering report. Plumbing conditions, obvious safety issues, repair priorities, and a rough range? Very rough. The kind of rough that grows teeth when you get permits. Mara agreed before she could reconsider. Eleanor's typed warning seemed to rustle inside her backpack. Tomas arrived at the depot the following morning in a white van with Reed plumbing and hydronics ghosted on the side where newer lettering had been removed. He was 58, broad through the chest, with iron gray hair and a mustache that made even friendly remarks sound like code violations. His work shirt was clean. His boots were not. He saw Ida waiting at the gate and pointed at her. You still owe me 3 bottle deposits. The company owes you. The company evaporated, then invoiced the atmosphere. He smiled despite himself and accepted the key she held out. Mara stood beside the loading bay with a clipboard she had made from cardboard and a binder clip. Tomas looked from the clipboard to her caramel work boots. Your own gloves? She lifted them from her jacket pocket. Flashlight? Backpack? Respirator? For inspection? For the rooms Ida calls fine. Ida locked the gate behind them. Nobody invited you. You did last year. The dust remembers me. Inside, Tomas stopped just past the personnel door. He did not look up first. He studied the floor, following old drain lines and discoloration toward the central bay. Then he raised his eyes to the suspended pipes. Still standing, he said. That's the dream, Mara replied. That's the minimum. They began at the active cold water service near the rear boiler room. Tomas opened nothing. He traced the line with a flashlight, photographed joints, and tapped insulation tags with the end of a folding ruler. Mara pointed to the bright brass valve. Recent replacement. 11 months, Ida said. Packing failed on the old one. Who isolated the branch? Tomas asked. City shut curb service. You replaced it. I wanted to see whether you remembered. Ida gave Mara a look. He gets worse when paid. Tomas crouched near a patch of green corrosion. This line feeds the toilet and fire connection. Nothing else should be live. Should? Mara asked. Welcome to old buildings. They followed it through a low service passage. Mara noticed dampness beneath a T where the dust had gathered into dark paste. That branch is holding pressure, she said. Tomas aimed his light at it. Good. Good that it's live? Good that you saw it before leaning on the pipe. He photographed the T. The branch disappeared overhead toward the production bay. Could be trapped water, Mara said. Could be. We don't guess with corroded galvanized. He marked the location on a photocopied floor plan. The original drawing was so faded that some walls appeared optional. In the central bay, he examined the washer connections. 2 supply lines had been capped. The drain trough was filled with grit and fragments of green glass. A thick scale ring marked the inside of the first tank. Mara ran her flashlight along the drive assembly. Ida says the motor was rebuilt. I am not a motor. I didn't ask you to be. People see a tradesman and develop magical beliefs. I was asking whether the plumbing side could be isolated into one operating section. Tomas looked at her, then at the washer. Maybe. It was the first word that did not sound like a funeral. He traced the inlet manifold. The machine had 3 wash stages, a rinse, and a final sanitizing section. Several valves were frozen, but the main cast housing showed no obvious cracks. Tomas made Mara hold the flashlight while he used a small inspection mirror around the underside. No opening anything, Ida warned. I know what inspection means. I've seen your invoices. That's not the same thing. Mara leaned closer. If the tanks hold, could we run only the first line? Not safely. Incomplete wash cycle gives you dirty bottles that look persuasive. What about using the machine for handling and adding a separate sanitation loop? Tomas shifted the mirror. Possible. Depends on what you intend to fill. I don't know yet. Then the machine is not your first problem. What is? Your first problem is deciding what clean means for the product. Water, milk, detergent, beer, soup jars, different system, different standards. Your second problem is getting reliable water to the part of the building where you need it. Your third problem is draining it without sending the neighborhood your mistakes. And after that, the roof is leaking on your questions. As if summoned, a drop struck Mara's clipboard and blurred the word manifold. They moved to the office mezzanine only after Tomas tested the lower stairs and refused to climb past the caution tape. From the ground, he inspected visible piping with binoculars. Mara had never seen a plumber use binoculars. Bird watchers have one good tool, he said. The tour lasted 3 hours. The rear distribution lines were beyond practical reuse. Several hangars had failed. One section near the loading ramp had been patched with mismatched fittings and what appeared to be automotive hose. The boiler had been disconnected properly, but the room's floor drain backed up when Tomas poured half a cup of clean water into it. He did not pour more. Not everything was hopeless. The incoming service appeared sound from the wall to the newer valve. A copper branch installed during the depot's final operating years could potentially feed a small washing area. The cast iron floor drains in the central bay were ugly but not visibly collapsed. The toilet flushed after Ida performed the sequence on the handwritten sign and kicked the tank once. Mara wrote until her wrist hurt. At the side loading ramp, Tomas paused where damp weeds grew through a split in the pavement. You're calculating labor you can do yourself, he said. Some of it. Stop. I'm allowed to clean drains. After they're evaluated, you're allowed to remove non-hazardous debris after the truss clears it. You're allowed to paint pipes pretty colors if that makes you happy. You are not allowed to make a budget by assigning yourself every dangerous task for free. I've done demolition in occupied buildings with site plans and supervision. I know my limits. So did 3 men whose fingers I remember separately. Ida, standing at the top of the ramp, said, "That is a terrible sentence. It is an accurate sentence." Mara shut her clipboard. "I can't afford a full replacement." "I didn't say full replacement. You frowned at every pipe. I have one face. Don't price from it." Back at the workbench, Tomas removed his gloves and cleaned his glasses. The green bottle stood where Mara had placed it, its plain cork angled toward the door. He picked it up by the neck. "Bell route," he said. seeing the scratched mark. "Eleanor used to bring these to my shop." "You knew her?" "Everybody on the route knew Eleanor. She could turn a delivery receipt into an interrogation." Ida crossed her arms. "Your account was always short. My employees drank the water. Water doesn't consume glass. They broke things, and glass doesn't walk." Tomas set the bottle down. "Your grandmother made me replace a bottle rack because it tipped when loaded. I told her it was the floor. She told me a bad floor is not improved by a worse rack." Mara heard Eleanor's voice so clearly that she turned toward the empty bay. "Was she right?" she asked. "Yes, I hated that." He took her clipboard and wrote 3 headings on a clean page. Safe now, repairable, later. Under safe now, the list was short. Incoming service, toilet with conditions, isolated fire line pending test. Under repairable, he placed a limited cold water branch, 1 central bay drain, and a new utility sink and sanitation connection within a restricted work zone. Under later, he wrote everything else. Mara looked at the middle column. How much? Tomas named a range. Even the low number was more money than she had. That includes labor? It includes licensed work and materials. You can reduce some site preparation if the trust approves, and hazardous material review is current. And the washer? Not included. Drain clearing, diagnostic only. Permits? Not all. Insurance? I'm a plumber, Mara, not a sadist. Ida turned away to hide a smile. Mara did not. What if I build the system around that middle column? Then you might wash a limited volume safely, once you know what you're washing and why. Might? Tomas put his glasses back on. Repairable does not mean affordable. Affordable does not mean viable. Viable does not mean you should do it. You practice that speech? I practice plumbing. Speeches are what people buy when they ask me to look at buildings they love too soon. Mara glanced around the stained brick, the rust, the shafts of pale light. I don't love it. No, Tomas said. That would be easier. He packed his inspection mirror and folded the floor plan into his case. I'll send the written summary tonight. Don't buy anything until you have it. I wasn't going to. Both Tomas and Ida looked at her. Mara reached into her backpack and pushed a page of utility sink listings deeper beneath the penny envelope. Tomas sighed. Eleanor warned me about you. Mara went still. When? Years ago. She said if a dark-haired woman named Mara ever asked me whether something could be fixed, I should answer the question she meant. What question was that? Tomas lifted his case. Whether it would still be worth fixing after she finished proving she could. Mara looked at Tomas across the workbench. When did she warn you? 6, 7 years ago. He latched his case. I replaced that rack at my shop. Eleanor watched me level it, then said you were applying for maintenance work and would probably come around asking questions. She knew about the apprenticeship. She bragged about it for 40 minutes. I didn't get accepted until the next spring. Then she started bragging early. The answer should have pleased Mara. Instead, it made Eleanor's silence feel more deliberate. Pride had existed in the same mind that sealed a penny inside an envelope. What answer did you give her? Mara asked. To the question you meant? Tomas glanced toward the washer. I told her some things are worth fixing because you need what they do. Some are worth fixing because knowing how will help with the next thing. And some are just expensive ways to avoid saying goodbye. Which one is this building? That's not a plumbing question. He handed her his business card, though his number was already in her phone. On the back he wrote, due after report, and the amount they had agreed on. No purchasing, he said. You've made your position clear. You're still touching the utility sink listings through your backpack. Mara took her hand off the bag. After his van left, Ida opened 2 folding chairs in the central bay and placed them near the washer. She returned from the office with a dented cash box and a ledger so large it looked capable of injuring someone. What now? Mara asked. Now you learn what the pipes were for. I know what pipes are for. That sentence is why tradespeople have blood pressure. Ida opened the ledger. Every page was divided into columns. Customer, route, container type, quantity out, quantity returned, deposits held, breakage, credit. Some entries had been made in blue ink, others pencil. Initials crowded the margins. We didn't make most of what moved through here, Ida said. People hear bottling depot and picture a factory producing one drink. We washed, inspected, and circulated standard containers for small businesses that couldn't afford their own return systems. Who filled them? Depends on the account. Some rented a sanitary bay. Some filled at their own license sites and used us for container management. Water was handled here until the filtration line became too expensive. Mara followed a row of figures. You carried 44,000 containers? That year. How many did you own? Wrong question. How many did the suppliers own? Still wrong. Ida tapped the deposits column. The network carried them. Customer paid a deposit. Store recorded the return. We credited the store, sorted the bottle, inspected it, washed it, and sent it back where it belonged. Ownership mattered less than keeping the loop intact. Until it wasn't. Until too many accounts wanted custom bottles, too many drivers left, fuel climbed, and our washer needed work nobody funded. Then Eleanor started stretching routes. You can stretch a route right up to the point it snaps. She showed Mara the final year. Pickups had slipped from twice weekly to once, then to irregular marks made in red pencil. Deposits stopped balancing. Customers waited for clean stock and bought disposables rather than lose sales. People didn't leave because they hated reuse, Ida said. They left because empty bottles occupied their storage rooms and nobody came when promised. Mara turned a page. So reliability is the product. Now you're learning. Not clean glass? Clean glass is a requirement. Reliability is what they buy. Mara photographed several pages with her phone. How many former accounts are still operating? Maybe 8. Half won't speak to us. Because of the deposits. Because Eleanor promised pickups after she no longer had a driver. You were the driver. I was recovering from shoulder surgery. She thought need could be used as a scheduling method. Mara pictured Eleanor in the depot office, writing promises against an empty calendar. Did she apologize? She brought me soup. That's not an apology. It was good soup. The first business on the old route was 6 blocks away, close enough that Mara and Ida walked. Mara carried the green bottle in the reinforced drink carrier. Ida refused to hold it, saying the person with the proposal should carry her own visual aid. Maribel's kitchen occupied the corner of a converted machine shop. Its owner, Maribel Santos, was in her 50s and wore a flower-marked black apron over office clothes. Shelves behind the counter held quart jars of tomato broth, bean soup, and a yellow curry Ida identified by smell before they entered. Maribel recognized her through the glass door. "No," she called. "We haven't asked yet," Ida said. "You walk like an invoice. We're asking about returns." Then no with memory. Mara placed the green bottle on the counter. Maribel looked at it without softening. "We use jars, not those." "It's a rote sample," Mara said. "I'm assessing whether a smaller return service could work." "Smaller than nothing?" "More frequent than nothing." Maribel folded her arms. "Your depot left 116 dirty jars in my rear storage room for 5 weeks." Ida said, 112. I counted 116. 4 were another supplier's. They all smelled like cabbage. Mara took out her clipboard. "How much space do returns take now?" "None. I use disposables." "How much do they cost?" "That is my business." "Would you consider a trial if pickups were fixed twice a week and missed service, returned the handling fee?" Ida turned to look at her. Maribel noticed. "You didn't discuss that part." "No," Mara said. "I'm discussing it now. You'd pay me for missing a pickup? Credit the service fee. Otherwise, a schedule is just something I print." Maribel's mouth moved at one corner. "How long have you been doing this?" "About 9 minutes. That explains the confidence." She refused a trial but allowed Mara to write down the sizes and monthly quantity of jars she used. At the door, she called after them. "If you come back with numbers instead of family history, I'll listen for 5 more minutes." Outside, Ida stopped beneath a street tree, planted in a square of stubborn dirt. You cannot promise penalties before pricing the road. I promised nothing. I asked if she'd consider it. You said missed service returned the fee. Would you trust a pickup schedule with no consequence? No. Then it belongs in the price. Ida's expression remained severe for another second, then broke. Eleanor would be furious. Why? She hated refunding anything. They visited a kombucha maker in a narrow production space behind a coffee roaster. The owner, Duncan Price, met them beside stainless tanks that hissed softly in the cool air. He remembered the depot and disliked it with impressive precision. Your driver chipped the lips on my bottles. Ida said, your capping machine chipped them. My capping machine never left this room. Exactly. Mara placed the root bottle under a hanging light. Would you use a standard bottle if you didn't have to store a month's worth of returns? Duncan picked it up, checked the heel, and immediately found Ida's root mark. These are too heavy. For kombucha. For shipping. We're talking local circulation. Local circulation becomes regional shipping the first time a distributor makes you feel important. He handed back the bottle. I'm growing. Then don't promise more than you can return, Ida said. Mara asked what volume would remain local even if his distribution expanded. Duncan resisted, then named 2 coffee shops and 1 weekly market. 96 bottles a week, perhaps 120 in summer. I'd test it for 1 month, he said. If you have a process. I don't yet. His eyebrows rose. I'm measuring demand before designing one. That is disappointingly sensible. I have supervision. Ida accepted the insult as praise. Duncan wrote his email on the back of a label. Send container specifications, wash standard, turnaround, deposit value, breakage policy, and proof you're actually operating. Mara looked at the list. Anything else? Yes. Don't make me sentimental. The old system failed. I don't care whose granddaughter you are. The sentence followed Mara back to the depot, but it did not wound her the way Celia's remarks did. Duncan had handed her conditions instead of a verdict. Tomas's report waited in her inbox. His low estimate had increased by $800 after he priced the required backflow assembly. He attached photographs, marked floor plans, and a note in capital letters. This does not include making the bottle washer operational. Mara built a spreadsheet at the office mezzanine's lower landing because Ida still would not let her climb the stairs. She entered projected bottle volume, hypothetical service fees, fuel, utilities, plumbing, testing, insurance, breakage, and a monthly lease figure Ida warned was provisional. Every version turned red. If I get 3 more accounts like Duncan, it still doesn't cover startup, Mara said. Correct. If I add jars, sorting costs rise. Correct. If I raise service fees, disposables win. Sometimes. Mara closed the laptop harder than necessary. Was there a part of today intended to be encouraging? Maribel gave you 5 future minutes. She once threw a calculator at Eleanor. Did it hit her? Eleanor caught it and checked the tax. Mara's phone vibrated. Celia's name appeared, followed by a text. Please return the bottle. Owen says estate property should not have been distributed informally. Mara showed Ida. Is it estate property? Ida asked. Celia said it was rubbish. Rubbish can belong to an estate. Whose side are you on? The side where people do not confuse being mistreated with being automatically correct. Mara stared at the green bottle on the workbench, its faded label named Eleanor's Home, not the depot. The cream strip remained secured inside the envelope in her backpack. The bottle itself had led her here, but the route mark linked it to Ida and the old operation. What would happen if I returned it? Mara asked. You would still know the address. That isn't what I mean. I know. Ida sat opposite her. Ask why she wants it. Mara called Celia. Owen answered. Where's my aunt? She's meeting the realtor. You need to bring the bottle back. You text from her phone now? She left it here. At the house? A hollow metallic bang sounded behind him, followed by men's voices. We're clearing the garage, Owen said. Everything has to be out before photographs. Mara heard something roll across concrete. What are you moving? Junk, old crates, hand trucks, a bunch of filthy ledgers. Mara stood so quickly the folding chair fell behind her. Ida was already watching. Don't let them take anything, Mara said. Owen laughed. You don't get to give instructions about my house. Look at the crates. Are there stenciled numbers on the sides? The line went quiet except for the scrape of wood. Then Owen said, What exactly did Grandma leave you? What did she leave you? Owen repeated. Nothing you can sell. That isn't an answer. It's the only one you're getting until you tell those men to stop. A crash sounded behind him, followed by a curse. Mara pressed the phone closer. Owen. They're loading scrap. The realtor wants the garage empty. Old wooden crates aren't scrap. Neither are ledgers. They smell like a wet basement. Put me on speaker. No. Then tell them to set aside anything marked Hart Bell, SWCT, or Weller. There was a pause. What's SWCT? South Weller Community Trust. And what does that have to do with Grandma? Mara looked at Ida. She stored equipment from the depot. You said it was an empty building. It is mostly empty because some of its things are in your garage. My garage. The trust may own them. May. Mara hated the uncertainty in the word as soon as it left her. Owen heard it too. You're trying to stop my clean-out over property you can't even identify. I can identify it if you wait until I get there. I have a crew by the hour. I'll pay for the hour. Ida reached for the phone. Mara moved it away. You will not, Ida said. Owen heard her. Who is that? Someone who knows the equipment. Does she know what you inherited? Ida took the phone before Mara could stop her. This is Ida Bell with South Weller Community Trust. Please tell the crew not to load any stenciled root property until we can examine it. Owen's voice changed, gaining the polite firmness he used with people whose status he had not yet calculated. Ms. Bell, I'm not trying to interfere with your organization, but everything at this address passed to me under a valid will. Things belonging to somebody else do not pass under your grandmother's will. Do you have proof they belong to you? I can come identify them. With proof? With 40 years of memory and records, we can compare. That's not what I asked. No, Ida said. It's what I have before lunch. She handed the phone back to Mara. Owen exhaled. You have 30 minutes. After that, they keep loading. The call ended. Ida picked up the green bottle and put it in Mara's reinforced carrier. We're taking my car. I can cover the crew's weight. With what? Mara righted the folding chair. I have money. No, you have numbers slowly becoming eviction. That's dramatic. You fell asleep on a bus yesterday and missed your stop by a mile. How do you know that? You told me it was traffic. There was traffic. There is always traffic. That is why it makes a sturdy lie. Ida locked the depot while Mara gathered the ledger photographs, route mark list, and Tomas's floor plan. Her car was a gray station wagon with a dented rear door and a milk crate full of ratchet straps in the back. Do those belong to the trust? Mara asked, buckling in. They belong to anyone who returns them. The Foster Avenue row house looked smaller without Eleanor in it. A realtor's sign leaned against the front steps, not yet planted. The red brick had been recently washed, leaving clean rectangles where flower boxes used to hang. Eleanor's front window was bare. Mara could see pale squares on the wall where photographs had been removed. In the alley, 2 men were loading a box truck under a sign that read, Bay City Estate Clearance. Wooden crates stood in 3 rows beside the garage. Some had slatted sides for bottles. Others were divided into square compartments, gray with dust and softened at the corners. Ida braked hard enough to shift the milk crate. Those are root racks. Owen stood at the garage opening with a tablet. He wore old loafers without socks and held a paper cup that said, Declutter your life. You took 41 minutes, he said. You counted? Mara asked. The crew did. One of the workers wheeled out a steel hand truck. Its rubber tires were flat, but a faded yellow number showed on the frame. Ida stepped in front of it. Set that down. The worker looked at Owen. "Hold it," Owen said. Ida crouched near the frame. Beneath the yellow number was a metal tag secured with 2 rivets. Paint obscured most of the letters. She rubbed it with her thumb. "SWCT," she said. "Trust Inventory." Owen leaned over her shoulder. That could say anything. It says SWCT. It could be a manufacturer. South Weller Community Trust manufactures extremely bad hand trucks. Mara moved among the crates. Several bore black stencils. R3, R5, Kitchen North. One had HB Refill burned faintly into a rail. "Here," she called. Ida examined it. "Company mark, not trust. This predates the transfer." "So it belongs to Owen?" Mara asked. "Maybe. Depends whether it was included in the operating assets conveyed to the trust." Owen spread his hands, again with maybe. "We need inventory records," Ida said. "You should have brought them. You gave us 30 minutes. I didn't give you permission to turn my garage into an archive." The liquidator, a compact man named Sal, whose name was embroidered above his shirt pocket, joined them with an intake sheet on a clipboard. "I can separate disputed items," he said, "but somebody has to pay the hold fee." Owen pointed at Mara. "She volunteered. I volunteered to cover 1 hour. That hour ended 11 minutes ago." Mara looked inside the truck. Stacks of crates had already been strapped against the forward wall. Behind them were 2 route carts, metal shelving, and a hand-cranked labeling stand. "How much has been loaded?" Sal checked his sheet. 28 wood units, 4 metal carts, 1 label press, 2 pallet scales, mixed records, 1 rolling desk. "Mixed records?" Mara asked. "Boxes of paper. Where are they? Forward. Can you unload them?" "I can. Hold fee plus labor." Ida took Mara's arm before she could ask the price. "Not yet." Owen noticed. "This is ridiculous. If the trust abandoned its equipment in Grandma's garage for 8 years, that isn't my emergency. It was stored here because the depot roof leaked over the road office," Ida said. "Did you pay her storage?" "No. Did you have an agreement?" "Eleanor was on the trust committee." "That isn't an agreement." Celia's voice came from behind them. "What is going on?" She stood at the alley gate with the realtor, a silver-haired woman carrying a tape measure, and the expression of someone reconsidering a listing. Celia had exchanged the funeral black for a pale blue sweater, but she still wore Eleanor's pearl earrings. Owen pointed at the truck. "Mara says Grandma gave away half the garage. I said the trust may own its old equipment." Celia looked at Ida, and surprise flickered across her face. "Ida Bell," she said. "Celia." Their names landed with the flat weight of 2 objects set on a table. "You knew this stuff was here?" Mara asked Celia. "Some equipment was stored after the depot closed. Why didn't you tell Owen before hiring a liquidator? I assumed anything left this long had been abandoned. You assumed the bottle was rubbish too." Celia's eyes moved to the reinforced carrier in Mara's hand. "You brought it." "It brought me, apparently." "Mara," Owen said, "stop talking like it's a magic lamp. What did you find?" "A chance to apply for an operating lease." Silence held for 1 beat. Owen laughed. It began as disbelief and became relief. "A lease?" "Renewable if I meet the trust's requirements. So you don't own the building?" "No. You don't own the land. The trust does." "No money?" "No." He looked at Celia. "She found a condemned rental." "The building is not condemned," Ida said. "It has boards over the windows. Some of our finest institutions do." Owen shook his head at Mara. "You nearly stopped the sale of my property because Grandma left you an application. She didn't leave me the application." "What did she leave?" "The bottle." "I own the bottle." "You didn't want it until you thought it held something. I want the estate handled correctly." "No, you want every closed hand to have your name inside it." Celia stepped between them. "Enough." Mara pointed toward the truck. "Tell him what those ledgers are." Celia's composure slipped. "Old records." "Whose?" "I don't know. You lived here. You cared for her every day. You knew Ida. You knew the depot. I knew it ruined her retirement." Ida flinched as though slapped. Celia continued, quieter. She poured years into that building after it stopped serving anyone. Every roof estimate, every trust meeting, every call about vandalism. She kept those filthy crates because throwing them away felt like admitting she had failed. They weren't hers to throw away, Ida said. Then you should have taken them. The realtor pretended to measure the garage opening. Mara saw the truth lodged inside Celia's cruelty. Ida could have retrieved the property. The trust could have made storage arrangements. Eleanor had allowed public equipment and private grief to blur together, then left everyone else to separate them. Sal tapped his clipboard. I need a decision. Ida pulled out her phone. I can get the transfer inventory from the annex. How long? Sal asked. An hour, maybe 2. I've got another pickup. Owen looked at his tablet. Load it. Mara stepped toward him. At least leave the records. You can buy them from the liquidator. They may not be yours to sell. Then prove it and get them back. Celia said his name, but without force. Owen nodded to Sal. The workers resumed loading. Mara heard wood strike wood inside the truck. You'd rather risk selling something that isn't yours than wait 2 hours? I'm not risking anything. My clearance agreement says disputed title is handled through reimbursement. Reimbursement won't restore records if they're pulped. Sal raised a hand. We do not pulp on intake. It gets sorted. When? Mara asked. Tomorrow, likely. Items with resale value are photographed. Paper is assessed separately. Give me a copy of your intake list. Owen started to object. Sal tore off the yellow carbon sheet and handed it to her. Public business address is at the top. Bring documentation. Ask for me. Ida photographed every visible stencil while the workers loaded. Mara photographed the truck, the crates, and the old garage shelves. One shelf carried dust outlines, showing where other things had stood before they arrived. What was there? She asked. Celia looked away. Owen answered. More racks. First load went this morning. To the same place? Most of it. Most? Some metal was scrap. Ida closed her eyes. The workers rolled the final hand truck up the ramp. Its flat wheels thumped twice before disappearing into the box truck. Sal secured the door. As the truck pulled into the alley, Mara looked at Celia. Did Eleanor know you were clearing this? She's dead, Mara. That wasn't my question. Celia's face tightened. She knew Owen planned to sell the house. When? Before hospice? And the depot things? She said she would deal with them. Ada let out a bitter breath. Eleanor's unfinished work seemed suddenly everywhere, in the garage, in the archive box, inside the Cork, and between women who had each waited for someone else to make the first honest move. The truck turned at the end of the alley. Mara looked down at Sal's yellow intake sheet. We'll need a van, she said. Ida glanced at her. First we need proof, and then a van, with money you do not have. Mara folded the intake sheet along its carbon-smudged edge. Then I'll have to find out which costs more. What? Losing the equipment, she said, or proving Eleanor right about me. Ida's expression tightened. Do not spend money to argue with a dead woman. I'm trying to recover equipment. You said proving Eleanor right. I know what I said, and I know what it costs to build a life around winning an argument nobody living can award. Mara folded the intake sheet again, smaller this time. Are you helping me or not? Ida looked toward the empty garage shelves. Unfortunately. They drove to the annex with the green bottle wedged between Mara's boots. Ida said little. She handled the station wagon as though every other driver had personally disappointed her. At the records room, they spread the transfer documents across 2 folding tables. The original inventory ran 43 pages and had been prepared by 3 different volunteers using 3 different descriptions for the same objects. Route rack became bottle crate, then wood grid unit. Hand trucks appeared as carts, dollies, and mobile conveyance, which Ida said sounded like a bus. They matched photographs first. Eleanor had photographed depot equipment against numbered bays before the property transfer. A steel root cart with a bent left handle appeared in one image. The same bend showed in Mara's photograph from Owen's garage. A row of wooden racks bore the burned HB mark and newer trust inventory numbers stenciled underneath. "Here," Mara said. Ida compared the image with the transfer schedule. 36 root racks conveyed, 21 listed in building storage at last audit, which leaves 15. At Eleanor's house, apparently. There were more than 15 in the garage. Some may never have transferred. They built 3 lists: clearly trust property, likely trust property, and items they could not prove. The hand trucks and 11 racks fell into the first category. The label stand and pallet scales appeared in photographs, but not by serial number. The ledgers were named collectively as operational records and unquestionably belonged to the trust. Ida called Sal. He answered on the 4th ring. "Paper boxes are still sealed," he said. "Most wood units, too. Scrap truck came at 7. "What went as scrap?" Mara asked, leaning close to Ida's phone. Metal shelving, damaged carts, one scale with no platform, assorted steel. The carts had yellow numbers. Everything had numbers. Ida closed her eyes. "Can you place a hold on the rest? Already did after your visit. I need documentation by 3. We have it. And someone has to remove confirmed property by 5. I don't have free floor space." Mara asked the cost. Sal named a handling fee, then gave her the number of a local hauler who occasionally worked with the clearance company. The hauling estimate cost almost exactly what Mara had reserved for the backflow assembly Tomas required. Ida muted the call. "The trust can reimburse transportation after board approval." "How long?" "Next scheduled meeting is in 12 days. Sal needs it gone today. You can ask for emergency approval." "From how many people?" 4 signatures. "Can you get them before 5? Ida looked at the clock. "I can try." Mara called the hauler and booked the truck. Ida stared at her. "You lasted nearly 1 full day before confirming total cost." "I confirmed it. I hate it, but I confirmed it. You cannot reimburse yourself from an operation that does not exist. The trust can pay me back, if approved. If not, I own a very expensive afternoon." The liquidator's warehouse stood behind a marine supply shop near the harbor. Its concrete yard contained furniture, restaurant equipment, lamps, rolled rugs, and enough framed landscape prints to decorate a disappointing hotel. Sal met them at a roll-up door. "I separated what matched your photographs. The first row held 11 route racks, 2 flat carts, the bent-handle route cart, 1 hand truck, and 4 boxes of records. A second row contained 6 racks, the label stand, and a pallet scale." "Second row isn't established," Sal said. Ida handed him the transfer schedule. "It establishes a label stand," he said. "Not that label stand. It's the only one we had. That helps common sense, not title." Mara crouched beside the scale. A metal plate on its base had been scrubbed recently, revealing a manufacturer and serial number. She checked the inventory. "Not listed." Ida looked over her shoulder. Eleanor entered it as platform scale, no serial. "Then it stays." Sal spread his hands. "I'm not deciding ownership. I'm protecting my business." "Where are the first load racks?" Mara asked. "Some sold this morning." "To whom?" "Restaurant reseller took 8. 2 damaged units went to salvage. Can we buy back the 8? "You can call. They'll charge resale." Ida shook her head. "We recover what is proven. The label stand is useful. So is your grocery money." Mara stood. "You know about my grocery money, too? I assume food remains popular." The hauler arrived in a red box van driven by a woman named Patrice, who looked at the racks, looked at the building's narrow loading door, and increased her estimate by $50. "You said 11 crates," Patrice said. "I said 11 racks. These are crates. They're listed as racks. They load like crates." Sal walked away before language created another fee. Mara and Ida carried the record boxes while Patrice and her helper loaded the larger equipment. One box had split along the bottom, and Mara felt the pages shift as she lifted it. "Don't tilt," Ida warned. "I'm not tilting. You're thinking diagonally." Inside the van, the recovered equipment occupied less than a third of the floor. The emptiness around it made the loss visible. Mara pictured the first truckload already separated into other people's stock, the metal carts flattened with anonymous scrap. Owen arrived as Patrice secured the rear door. He parked beside the van and got out carrying the green root ledger Mara had seen in his garage. "This was in the kitchen," he said. "Celia found it after you left." Ida held out her hand. "Trust record." Owen kept it against his side. "Before I turn over anything else, I want something in writing that says Mara's arrangement doesn't create a claim on the house." "It doesn't," Ida said. "From the trust. The trust has no claim on the house." "Then writing that should be easy." Mara stepped between them. "You sent equipment away before checking who owned it, and now you want protection from the people who did check?" "I'm protecting the sale. From a bottle route? From you deciding Grandma meant to give you something she legally left me." There was fear beneath his irritation. Not fear of Mara taking the house, exactly. Fear that the will he trusted might contain a moral error, even if it contained no legal one. "I don't want your house," Mara said. "You've always said you don't care about things until somebody else has them." Ida moved, but Mara raised one hand. "When did I do that?" Owen gave a short laugh. "The tool money. Grandma offered to help, then you acted offended when she asked what it was for. I gave her a list. You gave her an estimate, because tools have prices. You were angry she didn't hand you cash. I was angry she made me justify a career you called janitorial work. That is not what I called it. You said I'd spend my life unclogging toilets." Owen's mouth twitched. He remembered. Mara pointed to the ledger. "Is that why you decided I took her money? Because I wanted tools? I didn't decide anything. Celia saw you upstairs. Celia said she saw me in the hall. Same difference." "No, it isn't." For a moment, the warehouse yard seemed to narrow around them. Owen looked away first. "I want the statement." "Fine," Mara said. "Give Ida the ledger." He handed it over, but when Ida took hold, he did not immediately release it. "Is the building worth anything?" he asked. "The building is not for sale," Ida said. "That isn't what I asked." "To you," Mara said. "No." Owen let go. At the depot, the recovered racks had to be unloaded through the side bay because the front threshold was too narrow. Patrice charged another half hour when a rusted gate hinge prevented the van from backing close to the ramp. By the time the last cart stood inside, Mara's shoulders burned. Dust streaked her jacket. Ida sat on an overturned rack and examined the green ledger Owen had returned. "It's a root reconciliation book," she said. "Last 18 months. Anything useful?" "Depends whether you enjoy evidence of slow collapse." Mara opened one of the record boxes. Damp had curled the page edges. She found customer agreements, deposit schedules, vehicle logs, and equipment manuals. Beneath them lay old route photographs. In one, Ida stood beside a white delivery truck, younger and heavier, wearing mirrored sunglasses. Eleanor stood on the loading ramp holding a clipboard. Neither woman smiled. Between them were 3 rows of clean bottles. "You both look wanted for questioning," Mara said. "We'd been arguing about tire rotation." Another photograph showed the washer in operation. Steam clouded the central bay. Glass moved in shining rows beneath the cast-iron guides. Mara held it up toward the machine. Much of the structure was unchanged. The same columns stood behind it. The same office mezzanine overlooked the line. Only the people, water, and motion were gone. Ida turned a page in the green ledger and stopped. "What?" "Nothing." That was a very specific nothing. Ida angled the book away. Mara reached for it. "You taught me the root system from these records, not this entry." "What entry?" Ida hesitated, then placed the ledger between them. Near the end of the final winter, Eleanor had written, "Emergency boiler service, cash pending receipt." The amount was $1,800. Mara read it twice. That was the amount Celia had accused her of taking from Eleanor's bedroom. "Who serviced the boiler?" she asked. "Company went out of business." Who took the cash? I delivered the envelope to Eleanor. To the depot? To her house. She said the technician would collect it that evening. Did he? I don't know. But the money existed. According to this entry, yes. Mara pressed both palms against the ledger page. Ida's voice lowered. This does not prove where it went. It proves she had $1,800 in an envelope for something that wasn't me. It may. Did you tell Celia? I didn't know money was missing. Did Eleanor? Ida looked toward the washer. If she connected it, she never told me. Mara remembered standing outside the locked storm door with receipts in her hands. She had begged Eleanor to believe a negative, while the truth might have been sitting in her own ledger. She closed the book. Call Tomas, Ida said. Mara looked up. Why? Because you are about to spend the rest of the day chasing a dead technician and an apology that may not exist. I have his report, and now you have racks. Ask what dimensions he needs for the restricted wash zone. You're changing the subject. I am choosing the living subject. Mara stared at the old photograph of bottles moving through steam. Then she took out her phone. Tomas answered, listened to the new equipment measurements, and said he could reduce the proposed pipe run by 12 feet if they positioned the utility sink beside the washer's first tank. How much does that save? Mara asked. Not enough to repay whatever you just spent. She looked at the recovered racks. No, she said, but it saves something. The 12-foot saving survived Tomas's written revision. Everything else grew more expensive. The backflow assembly required a different mounting bracket. The utility sink Mara had priced was too shallow for the largest jars. The central bay drain passed a camera inspection, but needed its trap cleared and sealed. Tomas removed 2 items from his estimate, added 3, and circled the final number as though Mara might otherwise mistake it for weather. She stared at the page on the depot workbench. You said the shorter run saved labor. It did. This is higher. Copper heard you were hopeful. Ida sorted recovered customer files into piles nearby. She's going to try to reuse something. I am sitting right here, Mara said. Tomas pointed to a corroded shutoff on the floor beside her. That is not a valve anymore. It is a sculpture about valves. I wasn't talking about that. You looked at it. Mara closed the estimate. If I get firm trial commitments, the trust can consider a building improvement match. Consider, Ida said. I know what the word means. You treated May like currency at the liquidator, and we recovered 11 racks. We lost more. Tomas wiped his glasses. Are all your meetings like this? No, Mara and Ida said together. The trust's proposed match would cover half of approved permanent plumbing work, but only after Mara submitted evidence that a pilot route could meet the charter. Mara still had to fund the other half: sanitation testing, container stock, insurance, and operating costs. Reimbursement came after inspection. Every dollar had to exist before anyone returned part of it. She took temporary evening work through a former Northline supervisor, repairing fixtures in furnished apartments between tenants. The job paid by completed unit. For 6 nights, Mara replaced toilet flappers, adjusted doors, patched nail holes, and listened to televisions through adjoining walls. She returned to her rented room after midnight smelling of joint compound, then revised the depot numbers until columns stopped moving on the screen. Duncan sent dimensions for his kombucha bottles and 3 photographs of chipped rims labeled "Examples of What Not to Do." Maribel sent nothing, which Ida called active neutrality. The 2 markets were more receptive. Harbor Corner had no room for dirty returns behind its register, but its manager offered a narrow storage cage near the loading door if pickups occurred every Tuesday and Friday. Patterson Grocery wanted deposits processed weekly and refused to explain missing bottles to customers. They'll blame us whether it's their bottle or not, the owner, Glenn Patterson, said. Then we use one standard container with a mark that can be checked at the counter, Mara said. People don't check marks. We make the mark impossible to miss. Color? Color wears off. Shape? Custom glass costs money. Ida reached into the drink carrier and placed Eleanor's green bottle on the counter. Root scratch. Glenn found the crossed lines near the heel. Customers won't see that. They don't need to, Mara said. Staff do. We have 6 people working different shifts. Then the mark has to be teachable in 10 seconds. Glenn picked up a pen and drew 3 possible symbols on the back of Mara's proposal. If I'm designing your system, I want a lower handling fee. You're drawing triangles. I have overhead. They left with a conditional 1-month commitment for 60 bottles a week. Harbor Corner offered 48. Duncan confirmed 96 if the sanitation plan passed his insurer's review. The projected route was still too small, but it had shape. Tuesday pickups could cover all 3 accounts in 4 miles. Friday could add Maribel if she agreed. Ida showed Mara how to schedule clean deliveries before return collections so the vehicle would never carry finished stock beside unprocessed glass. A route is choreography, Ida said, moving colored magnets across an old metal board. Except the dancers are heavy and some smell like onions. Did Eleanor make this board? She made the magnets. She said commercial route software charged too much to display bad news. Mara moved Duncan's blue magnet after Harbor Corner. No, coffee shops open earlier. He fills behind the roaster. The alley blocks after 10. You know current traffic? I know alleys. They preserve grudges. The board began to work. Drive time fell. Storage hours narrowed. The 2 route days could be handled with a rented cargo van until volume justified something else. Mara built missed pickup credits into the price and increased the deposit reserve so 1 broken week would not empty the account. When she entered the new figures, the spreadsheet remained red, but only at startup. By month 5, it reached black if every conditional customer stayed. Ida leaned over the laptop. That if needs its own line. I have a risk column. That is where optimistic people place fear so it looks organized. Mara added a customer loss reserve. The black moved to month 7. Happy? No, Ida said, less alarmed. Tomas accepted the restricted zone plan on the condition that Mara hire him for final connections and not improve his design overnight. The Trust's property committee approved the plumbing match in principle, pending firm commitments and a safe work schedule. For the first time, the numbers suggested the depot might support something other than memory. Then Mara found the green ledger in her backpack while searching for a blank envelope. The cash entry had waited between route totals while she built the proposal around it. $1,800, the exact amount that had ended her relationship with Eleanor. She called Celia from the Central Bay. Her aunt answered on the second ring. I'm in the middle of packing. I found a depot ledger. Celia was quiet. It says Eleanor set aside $1,800 for emergency boiler service. Mara continued, cash, pending receipt. What date? Mara read it. A carton scraped across a floor on Celia's end. That was years ago. That's the point. Old business records are not proof of anything. Proof of what? You know what? Mara watched Ida move route magnets in the office area. You understood before I said it. I remember the amount. Did you know about the boiler payment? No. Did you ever ask Eleanor why she had that much cash in her bedroom? She said it was household money. When? After it went missing. Before or after you told her you saw me? Celia did not answer. Mara's hand tightened around the phone. Did you see me take it? I'm not discussing this while you're agitated. I've had 6 years to calm down. Then another day won't hurt. The call ended. Mara stared at the screen until Ida approached. Do you want me to say I warned you? Would that bring you joy? No. Then save it. Mara packed the green ledger, the bottle, and the penny envelope into her backpack and left before Ida could offer to drive her. At Foster Avenue, the front door stood open behind a row of flattened moving boxes. Mara knocked anyway. Celia appeared carrying a roll of bubble wrap. 1 pearl earring was missing. The other hung from her left ear, absurdly formal against her gray sweatshirt. You can't arrive whenever you want, she said. That used to be your complaint when I stayed away. Celia glanced toward the street. Come inside. The living room had been stripped for sale. Eleanor's armchair was gone. Pale rectangles marked the walls, and the rug had been rolled, exposing scratches Mara remembered making when she helped move the piano. Celia set the bubble wrap on the mantel. Show me the entry. Mara opened the ledger on a folding chair. Celia read the line. Her thumb moved over the date. Ida remembers delivering the envelope, Mara said. She doesn't know whether the technician collected it. So, you have no receipt. No. And the money could still have been taken afterward. By me? I didn't say that. You said it 6 years ago. I said I saw you upstairs. You told Eleanor I went into her bedroom. Celia's face closed. You were standing near the bedroom door. I'd gone up for my jacket. It was hanging in the hall closet. I know where it was. Mara waited. The refrigerator in the kitchen made a low shudder. The sound was unchanged from Eleanor's last years, though Mara had offered twice to level it. Did you see me enter the room? She asked. Celia looked down at the ledger. No. The word was quiet enough to disappear into the empty house. Did you see money in my hands? No. Did you see me take anything? No. Mara felt no triumph. Her body seemed to have prepared for a blow and received an open door instead. Then why? Celia lowered herself onto the folded rug. You were angry about the tool money. Eleanor had cash. Then it was gone. You were upstairs. That is why you suspected me. It isn't why you said you saw me. I told her what I remembered. You told it in the shape you needed. Celia's remaining pearl trembled when she shook her head. You came into this house and made everything harder. She listened to you. If you said a nurse was abrupt, she wanted a new nurse. If you said she could climb her own stairs, she tried until she nearly fell. Then you went home. And I handled what happened afterward. So you got rid of me. I thought you might have taken it. But you didn't know. No. Did you tell Owen you didn't know? He already believed it. Because of you. Celia stood and walked to the bare window. I thought Eleanor would cool down. I thought the money would turn up or she would call you. Then you sent those letters. You gave them to her? The first 2. Mara's mouth went dry. There were 9. I know. What did you do with the others? I kept them. Why? The first one upset her for days. She stopped eating. She kept asking whether she had ruined everything. The hospice nurse said agitation was making her breathing worse. Hospice came years later. Not then. Later, when you wrote again. I wrote every few months. Celia closed her eyes. I told myself I was choosing when to give them to her. Then too much time passed. And the will? I knew about the penny. You let it stand. It was her will. You controlled every envelope and phone call that reached her. I cared for her. You isolated her. I cared for her, Celia repeated, louder now. Every single day. Both things can be true. Mara had no answer ready for that. Celia touched the lone pearl. I assumed she would change the will once she decided what she believed. She asked for Baines's number twice. I never knew she hadn't changed it until he called after she died. You didn't ask? How was I supposed to ask whether I still got the money? The shame in her voice was real. It did not repair anything. Mara closed the ledger. She hid an address in a Cork because neither of you could manage a phone call. Celia looked at the bottle protruding from Mara's backpack. I didn't know about the paper, but you recognized the bottle. I knew it came from Weller Street. I thought it was another piece of that place she couldn't release. You gave it to humiliate me. Yes. The honesty struck harder than another excuse. Celia removed the remaining pearl earring and held it in her palm. I was angry, she said. She spent her last clear morning asking whether the green bottle was still in the pantry. Not asking for you, not explaining. Just the bottle. After everything I did, that was what mattered. Mara pictured Celia lifting Eleanor at night, washing sheets, measuring pills, then standing in a pantry beneath an object whose meaning she did not know. "You could have thrown it away," Mara said. "I almost did. Why didn't you?" Celia closed her fingers around the pearl. "Because I wanted you to feel how empty it was." Mara picked up the ledger. "It worked," she said, "just not the way you meant." Celia's fingers closed around the pearl until its post must have pressed into her skin. "There's a box in the upstairs closet," she said. "Your letters are in it. I don't want them. They belong to you. They belong to her. She never saw 7 of them. Because of you. Yes." The bare room held the word without softening it. Celia went upstairs. Mara considered leaving before she returned, but the old house still knew how to hold her in place. Eleanor had taught her to strip paint from the window trim by the front bay. They had spread newspaper over the floor, and Eleanor had made her read the date of every page before covering it. "You should know what you're stepping on," she had said. Celia came down carrying a shoebox secured with a rubber band. Mara recognized her own handwriting on the top envelope. "I didn't open them," Celia said. "That's supposed to help?" "No." Mara took the box because leaving it with Celia felt worse. It weighed almost nothing. At the door, Celia said, "Did Ida tell you whether the boiler was repaired? She remembers taking the cash to Eleanor. That's all. So you still don't know. I know you didn't see me steal it." Celia's face tightened. "I said that. Say it again." "Mara, without explaining why you suspected me, without telling me how tired you were or what I made harder." Celia looked toward the kitchen, then at the shoebox in Mara's hands. "I never saw you take Eleanor's money." Mara waited for relief. None came. She opened the front door. "I'm sorry," Celia said. Mara stepped onto the stoop. "I believe you." Celia looked startled. "That doesn't mean I know what to do with it." She carried the letters to the depot without opening them. Ida was sweeping grit from the marked wash zone when Mara arrived. She had tied the red bandana over her hair and wore a paper dust mask that made her greeting sound like an insult delivered through a napkin. "You were gone 4 hours. I had a conversation. Those rarely improve with length." Mara set the shoebox on the workbench beside the green bottle and told her what Celia had admitted. Not every sentence. She left out the part about Eleanor's breathing and Celia's last clear morning because those details still felt warm from someone else's hand. Ida leaned on the broom. "Does it change anything?" she asked. "It changes what she can say happened. I meant for you. I know what you meant." Mara opened the green ledger to the boiler entry. "Can this stay in the trust file? It belongs there. I don't want it used to prove I took nothing. You cannot prove a negative with an unrelated payment." "I know. Do you?" Mara looked at her. "I spent 6 years bringing receipts to an accusation that had none. I'm done." Ida nodded once and carried the ledger toward the records cabinet. The shoebox remained on the bench all afternoon. Dust settled around it, but not on it, as though the envelope still expected to be delivered somewhere. The trust approved Mara's pilot proposal 5 days later. Approval came with 11 conditions, including completion of the restricted wash zone, water quality testing, proof of insurance, written commitments totaling at least 200 weekly containers, and a 4-week demonstration route. Successful completion would make her eligible for a 1-year renewable operating lease. Failure would return the property to open review. The improvement match covered half the permanent plumbing work, paid after inspection. Mara financed the other half with a personal loan from her credit union and a credit card whose interest rate appeared only after 3 screens of cheerful language. Her temporary apartment work covered rent if every invoice was paid on time. Groceries became oatmeal, eggs, and anything Ida put in front of her while claiming she had accidentally purchased too much. "You accidentally bought 6 sandwiches?" Mara asked. "Coupon problem. The receipt says, no coupon. Eat quietly." Maribel signed a conditional commitment after Mara returned with root prices, missed pickup credits, and a storage plan limiting dirty jars to 4 days. "You said twice weekly pickup," Maribel said. "Tuesday and Friday. What if Friday is a holiday? Thursday, with written notice by Monday. What if the driver is sick? I'm the driver. That did not answer me. Mara added an emergency hauler clause and the phone number of a delivery service willing to take overflow at a painful rate. Maribel signed. The total reached 316 containers a week. Tomas began work on a Monday when rain ticked against the sawtooth roof. He arrived with an apprentice named Len, a quiet man in his 30s who labeled every removed fitting before putting it in a bucket. Mara had spent the weekend preparing the approved area. She and Ida removed loose shelving, vacuumed non-hazardous debris with a rented machine, and painted boundary lines on the floor. They did not touch insulation, open pipes, or climb the mezzanine stairs. Tomas inspected their work. "This line is crooked," he said, pointing to Mara's yellow paint. "The floor is crooked." Then the line should oppose it morally. "You're delaying because you like criticism. I can criticize while working." He proved it. The live service was shut at the approved valve. Tomas tested pressure, drained the isolated branch, and cut away a section of corroded, galvanized pipe that looked worse inside than out. Rust had narrowed the opening to the width of Mara's little finger. Ida held it up. "We used to drink through that?" "You drank around it," Tomas said. The new limited line ran along the central bay wall, supported by fresh hangers anchored into sound masonry. It fed the backflow assembly, a deep utility sink, and a connection for a compact sanitizing unit Mara would lease rather than buy. The cast iron washer remained untouched, its tanks cleaned only on the outside. One day it might move glass again. For the pilot, the old machine would serve as a gravity inspection and handling line after Tomas verified its dry rollers could turn safely by hand. Mara scraped rust from a removable guard under Tomas's supervision. When she reached for a wrench to loosen a seized bolt, he slapped the back of her glove with a folded instruction sheet. "Approved task. Surface preparation. That bolt joins the drive guard. I need beneath it." Then ask, "Can you remove it?" "Yes." He did, then handed her the bolt. It had fractured halfway through the threads. Mara looked at it. "That," Tomas said, "is why asking costs less than proving." She dropped it into the reject bucket. "Do you and my grandmother share a script?" "No." She edited mine. They worked for 9 days. Nothing transformed quickly. Each improvement exposed another limit. The clean zone made the surrounding floor look dirtier. The new pipe showed how badly the old supports had sagged. Water flowed to the utility sink, but the drain gurgled until Tomas installed a vent correction. The leased sanitizing unit tripped the temporary circuit, requiring a dedicated electrical line the trust had not budgeted. Mara revised the startup figures. Red returned. The property committee agreed the electrical line qualified for the match because it would remain with the building. Mara still had to advance her half. Her credit card balance climbed high enough that the app began offering helpful articles about financial wellness. At night, she repaired furnished apartments. One unit had a bathroom door that swung open by itself because the building had settled. Mara adjusted the hinges, shaved the sticking edge, and watched it stay where she left it. The satisfaction lasted until she opened her banking app. On the 10th morning, Tomas performed the pressure test. Mara, Ida, and Len stood along the new run listening to water occupy the pipe. It made a brief, rushing sound, then quieted. Tomas checked every joint with a dry paper towel. "No leaks," Len said. "Do not announce that while I am still holding paper," Tomas replied. He tested the backflow assembly, flushed the line, and filled 3 sterile sample bottles for the laboratory. Then he turned the utility sink faucet. Clear water struck the stainless basin. The sound traveled through the production bay. Mara had heard water run from 1,000 taps. She had fixed faucets in apartments where tenants never learned her name. Yet here, beneath the leaking roof and beside the seized washer, the stream seemed almost indecently alive. Ida put one hand over her mouth. Tomas pretended to study the pressure gauge. Mara held her fingers beneath the water. It was cold enough to ache. "Don't drink it," Tomas said. "I know, lab first, I know. You have the face people make before ignoring me." She shut the faucet and dried her hand on her jeans. The laboratory results took 3 days. Mara checked her email often enough that the server temporarily locked her out. When the report arrived, the water passed bacterial and basic chemical screening. The drain sample and sanitation procedure also met the requirements specified for Duncan's bottles and Maribel's jars, subject to final operational verification. Duncan read the report and confirmed his trial by email. Maribel confirmed by text, followed by 6 questions she had already asked in person. The 2 markets sent signed forms. Ida printed every page and placed them in the blue succession folder. "We have enough volume," Mara said. "We have promised volume. We have the wash zone. We have a sink and a rented box that becomes a wash zone when operated correctly. We have water. We have a laboratory saying the water did not misbehave on Tuesday." Mara leaned against the workbench. "Could you permit one complete sentence to be good news?" Ida looked toward the new line, gleaming against stained brick. "We have a start," she said. It was enough. They set the first demonstration pickup for the following Tuesday. Clean bottles would go to Duncan in both markets. Maribel's first jars would enter circulation that Friday. Mara rented a cargo van, purchased deposit tags, and used 1 recovered rack to train each account on sorting rejects. Every evening she returned to the depot and ran the empty route with magnets, invoices, and imaginary delays. The shoebox waited beneath the workbench. On the night before the first pickup, Mara finally removed the rubber band. The letters lay in order. Her handwriting changed across the years, anger becoming restraint, restraint becoming formality. She opened none of them. She already knew what she had written. At the bottom was 1 envelope in Eleanor's handwriting, unsealed and empty. Mara turned it over. Her name was written across the front. Nothing else. No explanation, no apology. Only evidence that Eleanor had once prepared to answer and stopped before deciding what to say. Mara placed the empty envelope beside the green bottle. Then she took the cream address strip from its protective cardboard and fitted it back into the slit in the cork. She pressed the cork into the bottle's neck and set the bottle on the lower edge of the office mezzanine, overlooking the wash zone. "Is that safe?" Ida asked from the aisle. "It's out of the way. I meant for you." Mara looked at the faded home address on the label and the old root mark near the base. "No," she said, "but it's honest." Outside, rain began tapping the roof again. A drop struck the floor beyond the yellow boundary line. Then another landed closer. Mara looked up. Water darkened a seam above the new plumbing run. Mara crossed the yellow line before Ida could stop her, then halted beneath the darkening seam without standing directly under it. The next drop struck the new pipe hanger and broke into silver flecks. "Kill the sanitizer circuit," she said. Ida reached the disconnect on the dry side of the zone and switched it off. Mara moved the unopened cleaning supplies away from the wall, then placed a bucket beneath the drip. Water hit its plastic bottom with slow, hollow taps. "Roof was dry during Tomas's work," Ida said. The roof was dry because the weather was. Mara aimed her flashlight upward. Rainwater had found an old patch where 2 roof sections met above a steel beam. It traveled along the beam before falling near the pipe. "We can't operate under that." "No. Tuesday is supposed to be clear. Supposed to be is not a sanitation plan." Mara photographed the seam and called the trust's emergency property number. A board member answered from a bowling alley and made her repeat herself over crashing pins. By midnight, a roof contractor had agreed to inspect at 7. The contractor refused a permanent repair until the surrounding membrane dried. He installed a temporary exterior patch and approved an interior diversion pan draining beyond the clean boundary. The trust paid for it as building stabilization, though Ida warned Mara that every emergency expense made the board more attentive to her pilot. "They should be attentive," Mara said. "People prefer attention until it arrives with a clipboard." The inspection delayed vehicle pickup by an hour. Mara reached the rental lot to discover that the reserved cargo van had been given to someone else. The clerk offered a moving van large enough to furnish a house. "It won't clear Duncan's alley," Mara said. "It has a rear camera. The building will still be there behind me." After 20 minutes and one phone call to a manager, the clerk found a smaller van at another location. Ida drove Mara across town while Mara notified every account of a revised delivery window. "You haven't missed anything yet," Ida said. "I said revised, not missed." "Good. Did you expect me to lie?" "I expected you to wait until lateness became undeniable." "That sounds like experience. That sounds like Eleanor." They loaded the clean stock in the side yard. The recovered racks fit exactly across the van floor, but the ratchet points did not. Mara threaded straps through the rack bases and lost 12 minutes correcting a twist Ida spotted from outside. At Duncan's, 4 bottles failed his inspection because faint mineral haze remained near their heels. The laboratory had approved Mara's process, but Duncan held 1 bottle under a bright task light and turned it with the concentration of a jeweler. "Customers will think this is residue." "It's old glass etching," Mara said. "Customers will think it's residue." She set the 4 aside and issued replacement credit. Her loss rate rose before a single bottle had circulated. Harbor Corner's manager had cleared the agreed storage cage, but an employee had stacked cardboard boxes inside it that morning. Mara waited while they moved coffee filters, canned peaches, and 3 promotional displays shaped like footballs. At Patterson Grocery, Glenn had trained his staff on the crossed route mark. He had also drawn it upside down on the reference card, creating a symbol that looked almost identical and somehow deeply wrong. "It's 3 lines," he said. "It's 2 short lines crossed by a third. That is 3 lines. Not arranged like that. No customer is going to care. The deposit account will." They corrected every card. By the time Mara returned to the depot, Ida had arranged the receiving area with recovered racks for clear, amber, and rejected glass. Returns from the first pickup totaled only 38 bottles, mostly old samples Duncan had stored for the trial. It was not enough volume to justify the route. It was enough to begin. They checked each bottle under the inspection light, listening for the slight change in pitch when Mara tapped near a chipped rim. Rejected glass went into a padded bin. Acceptable bottles moved through the cast-iron washer's dry guide rails, which Tomas had freed and certified for hand operation. The rollers turned reluctantly, then more smoothly as the weight distributed. Ida stood on one side feeding bottles. Mara caught them on the other. For several minutes, glass clicked against iron in a steady rhythm. Not the roar of the old photographs, not steam and 11 roots. A small sound repeated carefully. Ida's eyes shone beneath the work lights. "Don't get sentimental," Mara said. "I have dust. You criticize Duncan for blaming everything on dust. Duncan deserves criticism." They washed the bottles in controlled batches through the compact unit, recorded temperatures and sanitizer concentration, then placed them on clean racks to dry. Mara checked the log twice before releasing stock. The first day ended 3 hours later than projected and $47 over budget. No one missed a pickup. The next Friday, Maribel handed Mara 83 soup jars and a bag containing 2 broken lids. "Lids don't go in glass return," Mara said. "They broke during use. Then they're packaging loss, not root breakage. Your agreement says damaged components. It says damaged returnable components. Those lids are disposable." Maribel smiled. "You read it? I wrote it? That is never guaranteed reading." She signed the pickup count. The rhythm developed through repetition, correction, and ordinary irritation. Duncan's coffee shop returns arrived with paper labels still attached, so Mara added a soak stage and charged him the agreed preparation fee. Harbor Corner miscounted deposits by 6. The next day, its manager found 6 bottles behind a display refrigerator. Patterson Grocery lost 1 rack because Glenn loaned it to a caterer, then recovered it after Mara invoiced the replacement value. Maribel became the most reliable sorter and the least generous conversationalist. "You are late," she said one Friday as Mara entered at 2:03. "Window is 2 to 3. It felt like after 3. The clock disagrees. Clocks don't store soup jars. Mara loaded the returns. "See you Tuesday." 2 to 3, Maribel called after her. Preferably 2. The depot began to smell different. Damp brick and old oil remained, but warm water and clean glass joined them. The restricted zone occupied only a small portion of the central bay. Beyond its yellow lines, the building was still boarded and stained. Buckets remained beneath roof leaks. The mezzanine stairs remained taped off. The rear boiler room remained a forest of corroded pipe. Yet every Tuesday and Friday, objects entered dirty and left clean. Mara used the service fees to cover rental vans, sanitizer, utilities, and part of the insurance. They did not cover her loan payment. She kept working apartment turnovers at night until she installed a towel bar backward and had to redo it. Her former supervisor called her aside. "You're tired." "I'm observant." "You put the set screw on top. The tenant can hang from it." The tenant shouldn't have to solve a puzzle. He cut her schedule to 3 evenings. The lost income frightened her more than she admitted. She stopped checking her credit score. Oatmeal became breakfast and occasionally dinner. When Ida brought food, Mara quit arguing and began washing the containers before returning them. On the 3rd week, Ida lifted a rack of wet jars and nearly dropped it. Mara caught the other end. "What happened?" "Bad grip. You had shoulder surgery years ago. You're not lifting wet racks." "I drove roots before you knew left-threaded fittings existed, and now you're not lifting wet racks." Ida jerked her end away, pain crossing her face before pride covered it. Mara lowered the rack to the cart. "I'm not questioning what you know. You're questioning what I can do." "Yes." "Because I just watched you fail to do it safely." The words hung between them, harsher than Mara intended. Ida took off her gloves. "Eleanor said things like that." Mara recoiled. "I'm not Eleanor. No. You stopped to feel guilty. That doesn't make the sentence wrong." "No." Ida flexed her shoulder. "But you could ask what I can do instead." Mara looked at the return log. "Can you manage receiving and counts while I unload?" "I can do more than count." "I know. Tell me what." Ida moved the inspection light closer. "I can inspect. I can stage. I can drive if you stop renting from thieves. You called their deposit policy standard. It can be standard and theft." They rearranged the work. Ida found flaws Mara missed and processed returns faster without lifting. The next cycle finished 35 minutes early. On the final week, the trust scheduled its operational review for Friday. Board members would inspect records, observe the wash process, confirm that service commitments had been met, and decide whether Mara qualified for the renewable lease. Owen called Thursday evening while Mara was reconciling deposits. "The house is under contract," he said. "Congratulations. Celia told me what she said to you." Mara kept entering numbers. "Which part?" "That she never actually saw you take the cash." "Does that change what you think?" "I think Grandma made her decision. That wasn't my question." Owen was silent. Mara heard a car door close on his end. "I don't know," he said finally. "You needed money. Everybody needs money. You needed it badly. I need it badly now. You should count your wallet. That's not fair." "No, it's what you did." He exhaled. "I was calling because there are 2 more wooden racks in the basement. The buyer wants them gone. Photograph the marks and send them to Ida. You can pick them up after she confirms ownership." "You really want paperwork for 2 pieces of junk?" "Yes." She ended the call and completed the deposit reconciliation. Friday morning arrived cold and bright. Mara unlocked the depot before sunrise, checked the wash zone, opened the receiving log, and turned on the water. The pressure gauge rose halfway, trembled, and fell. From the rear of the building came a dull, metallic knock, then the sound of water rushing where no water should have been. Mara ran toward the boiler room. A corroded branch line had split near the ceiling. Water struck the wall, poured across the floor, and spread toward the blocked drain. Ida reached the doorway behind her. "The board will be here in 3 hours," she said. Mara looked at the valve, the flooding room, and the service schedule clipped to her belt. Then she pulled out her phone and called Tomas. Tomas answered with sleep still in his voice. "Where's the water?" "Rear boiler room." "Old branch split near the ceiling." "Main service?" Pressure dropped at the wash zone. "Shut the incoming valve." "That kills the fire line." "Water running across an electrical room kills more." "Shut it." Mara handed the phone to Ida and crossed to the newer brass valve. She kept clear of the spray, braced her boots on the wet concrete, and turned the handle. It resisted halfway. "Don't force it," Tomas said through Ida's speaker. "Back a quarter, then close." Mara did. The valve moved with a low scrape. Water continued rushing for several seconds, weakened, then became a stream sliding down the wall. "Gauge?" Tomas asked. "0. "Good. Do not open anything. I'm coming." Mara looked at the flooded floor. Water had spread into the restroom passage and beneath stacked empty buckets, but stopped short of the production bay. The block drain had turned the boiler room into a shallow basin. "I need to notify the trust," Ida said, "and every account. The board is already coming. They need to know before they arrive." Ida's eyes rested on her for one beat, checking for hesitation. Mara had plenty. She used none of it. She called the property committee chair first. "We have a supply line failure," she said. "The main is shut, and the wash system is out of service. Thomas Reed is responding. The operational review can't begin as scheduled. Was anyone injured?" "No." "Any clean stock contaminated?" "No." "Failure is isolated in the rear. Can you be operational today?" "I don't know yet." The answer seemed to take longer than the other woman expected. "We'll still come at 9, she said, "for a condition review, if nothing else." Mara called Duncan, Harbor Corner, Patterson Grocery, and Maribel. She gave each the same facts. Plumbing failure, no confirmed service time, pickups delayed until she could provide a safe schedule. Duncan asked, "Can you still take my empties?" "Not until I know when I can process them. I need the racks out by noon. I can activate the emergency hauler clause. That costs both of us." "Yes." There was a pause. "Wait until 10. I can shift filling to this afternoon." Glenn Patterson complained that Friday was his busiest return day, then admitted he had only 19 bottles waiting. Harbor Corner could hold until evening. Maribel said, "How much water?" "In the building?" "On your floor. Maybe 300 gallons before shutdown." "Your drain works?" "Not that one." "You have squeegees?" "2. "You need 6. "I'll manage." Managing is what people say before asking for towels. She ended the call. Tomas arrived in 32 minutes with Len and enough pipe strapped to the van roof to make the vehicle look underlined. He inspected the rupture from a ladder positioned outside the wet area. The broken branch was not the same line they had replaced. It connected upstream of the restricted zone isolation, hidden behind a larger pipe, before turning toward an unused second-floor restroom. "This valve was supposed to be closed," Mara said. Tomas aimed his light at an old gate valve above the junction. "It is closed. Internally, it has become a suggestion. Can you cap the branch?" "Not at that junction. Threads are gone." "How much replacement?" "From the service entrance to our new connection." Mara understood before he named the cost. The number landed above her remaining credit limit. "Could we clamp it for today?" "No." "A repair sleeve?" "No. I have the board arriving in less than 2 hours. Then they can watch me say no." Len hid a smile by opening the tool case. Tomas climbed down. A temporary patch on that corrosion might hold an hour. It might split the next section and flood the clean zone. We replaced a sound material or the water stays off. Mara called her credit union from the side yard and requested a limit increase. The representative asked whether the expense was anticipated. "No," Mara said, watching water drip from the loading ramp rail. "That may affect eligibility. Unexpected expenses usually do." She was placed on hold. Ida came outside. "The trust may cover the failed service segment as a permanent building repair." "May?" "Yes. Tomas needs authorization now. I can authorize emergency stabilization up to a limit. Replacement is above it." "By how much?" Mara told her. Ida removed her glasses, cleaned them on her vest, and put them back on. "I can call the treasurer. How long?" "Longer than the pipe." The credit union representative returned and denied the increase because Mara's recent loan had not yet produced a payment history. Mara thanked her, ended the call, and opened the app for her other credit card. Ida took the phone from her hand. "Do not finance trust property at that rate. I financed the first half. This is outside the pilot scope. The route doesn't care whose scope broke. The board has reserves and a process. Water is currently ignoring it." They stood facing each other in the wet yard. Then Ida handed back the phone. "If you charge that, put the invoice to the trust immediately. No martyrdom disguised as bookkeeping. I was going to. You were going to wait until renewal and call it commitment." Mara said nothing. "Eleanor did that," Ida said. "She paid what the organization should have paid, then used the sacrifice as proof nobody else cared enough." The boiler ledger seemed to open between them. "Emergency boiler service. Cash pending receipt." "I'm not her," Mara said. "Then let people owe you properly." Mara charged Tomas's deposit and emailed the invoice to the trust treasurer while he watched. Ida obtained written confirmation that emergency reimbursement would be considered that afternoon without guaranteeing approval. It was not security. It was a record. Tomas and Len began cutting out the failed service section. The board arrived while Len carried corroded pipe through the side bay. 3 trust members stood just inside the central entrance, wearing sensible shoes and expressions meant not to reveal votes. The property chair examined the clean zone, the dry inventory, the shut-off log, and Mara's incident report. "You had this printed already?" she asked. "Ida has a printer in her car." "It runs on anger," Ida said. The chair looked toward the dark wash area. "Do you want to reschedule the operational review?" Mara could have said yes. The 4-week window allowed one makeup date for weather or facility failure. A clean review next Tuesday would show the system after the rupture disappeared into an invoice. "No," she said. "Review what happened." Ida glanced at her. Mara continued. "The service failed during startup. We shut down, notified customers, protected clean stock, and called licensed repair. Those are operations too. You cannot demonstrate the wash cycle. Not now. Tomas estimates water restored by early afternoon. If it passes his tests, we'll run a reduced cycle. If it doesn't, we won't." The board members conferred quietly, then agreed to continue observing without treating delayed operation as successful completion. Mara preferred that sentence to encouragement. It left room for failure without pretending failure had already occurred. While Tomas worked, Mara and Ida used a wet vacuum borrowed from the auto glass warehouse next door. Maribel arrived with 4 floor squeegees and a stack of old towels. "You came," Mara said. "I want my jars back. Your pickup isn't until this afternoon." Maribel surveyed the boiler room floor. "Then you have time to learn gratitude." She stayed 40 minutes, pushing water toward the working Central Bay drain. Before leaving, she handed Mara a wrapped sandwich. "Coupon problem?" Mara asked. "What?" "Nothing." Duncan delivered his empties himself at 11, keeping them in his van until Mara could accept them. Harbor Corner delayed its pickup window. Glenn sent a revised count without being asked. The schedule became smaller, later, and possible. At 1:20, Tomas opened the incoming valve. The new service line filled without knocking. He checked joints, flushed the branch, tested backflow, and documented pressure at every point. Mara watched his paper towels remain dry. "Say it," she told him. "Not leaking at the time of inspection. That is an ugly sentence. It is a safe sentence." He cleared the wash zone for use, then handed her an invoice carrying a balance large enough to alter several months of her life. "Trust has the copy," Mara said. "Good. Are you leaving? I have customers who scheduled their emergencies more professionally." He paused at the door. "Run the full startup checklist. The pipe is ready. You are not." Mara hated him just enough to listen. She flushed the utility sink, verified sanitizer concentration, checked the drain, inspected clean racks, and logged each result. The board watched without offering help. That was part of the test, too. At 2:15, Ida accepted the first returns. Mara rejected 3 chipped bottles and 1 jar with a crack hidden beneath its label. The reduced batch entered the wash sequence. Glass moved hand-fed through the old cast-iron guides into the compact unit, through rinsing and sanitation, then onto drying racks. A rack slipped as Ida turned it, but Mara caught the base without touching clean glass. "Bad grip?" Mara asked. "Bad floor. Ask what you can do instead. I can insult you from here. Approved task." They finished Duncan's bottles first so he could fill before closing. Maribel's jars followed. The market returns waited until the next morning by agreement, documented as delayed rather than missed. The final sanitized jar came out after 7. The board had stayed. The property chair reviewed deposit totals, customer notices, repair invoices, safety logs, and the adjusted route record. Nothing matched Mara's original schedule. Every change had a time, a reason, and a person notified. "You completed less volume than proposed," she said. "Yes. You incurred an emergency cost that may make your current financing unstable." "Yes. You also declined the permitted makeup date." "I didn't decline it. I used today as the test." "Why?" Mara looked across the bay. Tomas's new pipe ran clean and bright before disappearing into the old building. Beyond it, buckets still stood beneath roof leaks. "Because the system won't be judged only on days when the building behaves." The chair closed the folder. The trust members left without giving a decision. They would review the pilot record and vote after the reimbursement question was separated from the lease evaluation. Mara locked the side gate behind them. Inside, Ida was sitting on a recovered rack, rubbing her shoulder. "Did I just fail?" Mara asked. Ida looked at the rows of clean glass. "No." "Did I pass?" Also, no. Mara sank onto the rack beside her. For a while, neither spoke. The depot clicked and settled around them. High above, the green bottle waited on the lower mezzanine edge, its faded label turned toward Eleanor's old home address. At last, Ida said, "They asked me to abstain." "From the vote? I nominated you years ago. I trained you. Apparently, I have become biased." "Have you?" Ida considered it. "Yes," she said. "Terribly inconvenient." Mara leaned back against the iron frame. The decision would come Monday. Until then, the clean bottles still had to be delivered, the accounts reconciled, and the floor dried. She stood. "Come on," she said. "We're not done." Ida took the hand Mara offered and rose carefully. "No," she said. That was the point. They finished cleaning the boiler room at 9:30. Mara delivered Duncan's bottles before his Saturday filling shift and collected the market returns postponed from Friday. Harbor Corner's manager had labeled every rack correctly. Glenn Patterson had not. "You changed the mark again," Mara said. "It looked clearer. It looks like a lawn chair. It's memorable." She made him replace the reference cards while she counted returns. He complained for 11 minutes and signed the corrected deposit total without reading it. Reliability, Mara was learning, did not require people to become less themselves. Back at the depot, she processed the delayed stock and emailed the completed logs to the trust. Then she paid the emergency hauling invoice, the van rental, and the minimum on her credit card. The remaining number in her account would cover rent with $14 left. Ida drove her home. "You should sleep," she said. "I have apartment work at 4. You nearly installed a towel bar upside down, backward. That improves nothing. It means I recognize spatial orientation." Ida parked outside Mara's building but left the engine running. Whatever the board decides, the route worked. Mostly. "Do not become irritating in the precise way I trained you. I'm tired. It's all I have. Your grandmother would have called Friday a disaster." Mara looked at the dim tax office window beneath her room. Would she have been wrong? Yes. Disaster is when people stop returning. Monday morning, Mara waited in the church annex with coffee she could not taste. The blue succession folder lay on the table. Ida was present for the condition review but sat apart because she could not vote. The property chair did not create suspense. Mara appreciated that. The trust approved your operating lease. For a moment, the sentence did not attach itself to anything. Mara had imagined relief as a physical release, some knot opening beneath her ribs. Instead, she noticed the fluorescent light flickering above the records room door. For 1 year, the chair continued. Renewable subject to quarterly safety reporting, fulfillment of the service commitments, maintenance of the deposit reserve, and evidence that the operation is moving toward financial stability. What counts as moving? Losses narrowing according to the approved schedule. We are not asking you to manufacture profit on paper. The building is good at manufacturing water. Nobody laughed except Ida. The chair slid the lease toward Mara. Base rent was low, as promised. Insurance remained cruel. The trust retained responsibility for structure and capital systems. Mara accepted routine maintenance of her operating zone and equipment. She could expand only with written approval. There was no transfer clause, no promise that years of work would turn the brick walls into hers. The land and building would remain in community trust. The emergency service line replacement had been approved as a trust capital expense. Reimbursement would reach Mara within 10 business days. She let out a breath. That does not include the pilot plumbing you agreed to fund, the treasurer said. I know, or operating losses. I know, or the roof beyond the temporary patch. Mara looked at Ida. Do they always make good news sound repossessed? Only when lawyers reviewed it. Mara signed the lease. The property chair signed for the trust and handed her a key ring with 5 keys. The brass tags were stamped, front gate, personnel, side bay, boiler, office. Mara touched the last one. The mezzanine stairs are still restricted. Repair is scheduled from the building reserve. When? Next month, if the contractor remains truthful. Ida said, so spring. The chair gathered the papers. You begin as operator today. What was I before? Expensive to supervise, Ida said. Outside the annex, Mara stood on the ramp, turning the keys in her palm. They were ordinary hardware store keys, newly cut, their edges sharp. The penny envelope was in her backpack. For 6 years, Eleanor's 1-cent bequest had been the only official measure of what Mara deserved from her family. The lease did not reverse it. Mara was grateful for that. Nothing could now pretend Eleanor had repaired the damage from beyond the grave. The bottle had carried an address. Ida had opened a door. Everything after that had required other people to answer when Mara called, and Mara to answer them in return. She put the keys in her jacket pocket. Are you going to cry? Ida asked. No. Good. I forgot tissues. You have 3 packs in your car. Those are inventory. They went to work. The lease did not make the depot easier. It made the difficulties scheduled. The trust repaired the mezzanine stairs and replaced the worst section of roof membrane before winter. 2 leaks remained, each with a bucket beneath it. Tomas returned to label every active valve and charged Mara full price, then spent an unpaid hour arguing with Ida about whether the labels were large enough. The first renewal quarter nearly failed when Duncan reduced his volume after a distributor delayed his expansion. Mara replaced part of the loss with a vinegar maker whose bottles required a different soak time. Maribel increased her jars by 24 a week and claimed it was unrelated to Mara's needs. Harbor Corner added a second return shelf. Patterson Grocery continued inventing problems, several of which improved the system after Mara removed Glenn's preferred solution. Mara stopped renting a cargo van once a local delivery cooperative agreed to share a vehicle on opposite route days. The arrangement was less convenient and far cheaper. She hired Ida for paid route coordination 6 hours a week. Ida objected to the title. I coordinate more than routes. The budget supports 6 hours of routes. Then call me Operations Council. That costs more. Senior Route Coordinator. You complained about the first title. I've reconsidered. Mara printed Senior Route Coordinator on the next invoice. Ida found fault with the font but signed it. By January, service fees covered operating costs and part of Mara's loan payment. She still worked 2 apartment turnover evenings a week. Her credit card balance decreased slowly enough to be insulting, but it decreased. She moved from her rented room into a slightly larger studio near a bus line that reached Weller Street without a transfer. The kitchen had a level refrigerator. On the first night, Mara lay awake because it made no noise. Owen sold Eleanor's house after the buyer's inspection found old wiring beneath his fresh fixtures and moisture behind a newly painted basement wall. The final price was lower than he had announced to the family, and high enough that complaining about it required creativity. He brought the 2 remaining root racks to the depot in the back of his truck. Ida examined their marks. One belonged to the trust, the other had never been conveyed and legally belonged to Owen. "You can keep that one," he told Mara. "Write a receipt," Ida said. "For junk? For transferred property?" Owen stared at her, then wrote on the back of a hardware store invoice. 1 wooden bottle rack, given to Mara Hart, no value. Mara read it. No value? It's accurate. She looked at the solid hardwood dividers worn smooth by decades of bottles. "You keep having trouble with that word." Owen put his pen away. "You really think this is worth more than the house?" "No." He seemed surprised. "The house is worth more money," Mara said. "That isn't the only calculation. It usually is when bills come. I have bills. You have a lease. You fix a building you don't own, and if the trust says no next year, you walk away. That could happen, and you're comfortable with that? No." He waited for her to explain why discomfort did not invalidate the choice. When she did not, he looked through the side bay at the racks of clean glass. "So what did Grandma mean the bottle to give you? An address." "That's it?" That was enough. He shook his head. Not cruelly this time. He simply could not make the answer produce a number. Before leaving, he carried the gifted rack into the clean zone without being asked. He set it in the wrong place. Mara waited until his truck was gone before moving it. Celia came to the depot in February. She wore Eleanor's pearl earrings and carried a grocery bag containing 2 jars from Maribel's kitchen. Both had been rinsed. Neither had the correct return tag. "You could return those at Patterson," Mara said. "I didn't want to go to Patterson. Neither does anyone." Celia held out the bag. "Can I see the building?" Mara could have handed her the jars and pointed toward the exit. Instead, she gave her safety glasses. "The yellow lines matter," she said. "Don't cross one unless I tell you." Celia followed her through the production bay. She looked small beside the cast-iron washer. At the rear, Tomas's new service line ran cleanly through the boiler room. The failed pipe section hung on the wall with a red tag reading, "Removed, do not reuse," because Tomas believed even obvious objects needed instructions. On the repaired mezzanine, Celia stopped beside the green bottle. Mara had placed it on a plain shelf above the route board. The faded cream label still showed Eleanor's former home address. Beside it, beneath a clear clip, rested the narrow cream strip bearing 418 Weller Street. The plain natural cork sat in a shallow dish. The empty envelope Eleanor had addressed to Mara remained in the shoebox at home. "She asked for this the morning before she stopped speaking clearly," Celia said. "I know. I thought she wanted water. Maybe she did." Celia looked at the cream strip. "Or maybe she wanted me to find that. She put it where neither of us would see it unless the cork came out. Why?" Mara watched glass move below them through the hand-fed guides. "I don't know." Celia nodded, accepting less certainty than she once had. At the receiving table, Ida was sorting returns. She saw Celia approach and placed an empty rack beside her. "Clear bottles here," Ida said. "Amber there. Chips go in the padded bin." Celia glanced at Mara. "This isn't forgiveness," Mara said. "I didn't think it was. It isn't punishment either." "I know." Celia put on gloves. At first, she handled each bottle too carefully, turning it as though expecting a message inside. Ida corrected her twice, then showed her how to check rims against the inspection light. Celia found a hairline crack Mara had missed. "Reject?" Ida said. "Good." Celia placed it in the padded bin. Below the mezzanine, the depot remained scarred and incomplete. Wind found the old window frames. A bucket waited beneath one persistent leak. Mara's debt remained on a spreadsheet, and renewal would have to be earned again. Then Maribel's clean jars came off the line. Duncan's green bottles followed. Ida called counts. Celia repeated them. Mara rolled the finished rack toward the loading bay, where the afternoon route would carry the glass out and bring it back another day. The old washer's iron guides clicked beneath her hands. This time, the building answered with work.